Chapter 4794. Chen Qing also said afterwards, "If this is really a former heaven, it is really rare to preserve it like this." After he finished speaking, he gave Jian Wushuang a secret smile. It can be found by them that this old heaven hidden in the void is of supreme nature and great opportunity, even though it has become a dead zone and broken. Even if you can find a hint of the emperor's existence here, it is an unimaginable opportunity. After achieving the position of Yin Xian, time and years have become the most meaningless existence. Naturally, every step of the spiritual realization is unimaginable and unknown. The practice above Yin Xian is no longer a life in two, but a self-opening avenue from zero metamorphosis. The difficulty can be imagined, and the opportunity from Yangxian's enlightenment to Dianxian is to comprehend the fairy type. Once the fairy type is understood, it indicates that promotion to Dianxian is no longer unknown. But 99% of the immortals are stuck in this step of comprehending the immortality, and can no longer make a half step. Because the road to promotion is so difficult, even Yin Xian is keen to find some mysterious caves, trying to find the secrets left by the supreme power. Right now, there is a possibility that the atmosphere in this former heavenly court may be gathered up. Even Dianxian can't resist it. Standing at the end of several people, the eyes express covetedness, but he quickly returned to his normal look, without any movement. Jian Wushuang's heart was moved. If some kind of luck still exists in the former court of heaven, for them, it is really a creation. Looking at the ancient silent heaven that was standing above the abyss of the earth, Jian Wushuang gave a few words, and then stepped on the broken earth and walked forward. Chen Qing and others followed up. Although they have been reduced to burial ground, they still remain vigilant. In case there is a terrible danger in the dark, for them who are already at the end of the crossbow, they are really dead. Stepping forward on the suspended stones underneath the feet, the cold aura blew out of the abyss without seeing the bottom. The strength here is so thin that it can hardly be understood and absorbed, which means that Jian Wushuang and others will not get the slightest supplement here. Everything was so dead that he could hear his breath. Jian Wushuang walked carefully over the abyss. At the next moment, it seemed that something unknown was touched, and the abyss at the foot suddenly set off a breath of extreme air. Jian Wushuang reacted first, his arms shuddered suddenly, and Yanli slammed down. The two competed against each other, and swept through a shocking hurricane. Chen Qing and others also foretell that they would step into the air, and avoid the hurricane that swept through. The gravel over the entire abyss was blasted away, and the hurricane lasted for a long time. The sword has no double-faced dignity, and he looks under the abyss like a deep abyss. Click, click. A bit of bitterness, like the sound of unlubricated bones, came from that abyss. At the next moment, 3 Changhong streamers suddenly rushed out of the extremely dark abyss, and into the sky. Those who break into heaven die. The sound of Hongzhong de LV is like a thunder sky, resounding through the 8 wastelands. When the Changhong streamer dissipated, the 3 bones holding the real sword were reflected in Jian Wushuang's eyes. These 3 sensuous bones are full of strange colorful wamangs all over their bodies. Their clothes have long been ragged to the extreme, and even the real sword in the palms of the bones has been broken, full of barrenness and ancient silence. But no one dared to underestimate them, even if they have been dead for countless years. But that belongs to Dianxian's breath. Even time cannot be erased. 3 bones, 3 great Yinxian. Despite their avatars, their obsession keeps them guarding the heavenly court, so that no one can get close. Their celestial bodies are not completely free of flesh and blood, and there are a pair of shiny eyes scattered in their orbits. Those who break into heaven die. They repeated it again. The real sword shattered in his hand, and the sword headed directly at Wushuang. Jian Wushuang did not retreat. They inadvertently came to this formerly shattered heaven. The purpose was to find a possible opportunity. It would be a great regret if they returned. Opportunities and dangers coexist, so he doesn't want to retreat. Others have similarly found a former heaven. This is something that they dare not even imagine. If they don't go to investigate, I'm afraid no one will be reconciled. But in the face of such 3 great Yinxian, no one has confidence. For a time, Chen Qing and others looked at Jian Wushuang. What should I do, brother sword? Shall we rush in directly? Chen Qing's voice passed. Jian Wushuang didn't speak. At the next moment, when everyone hadn't responded, he actually broke up directly, and an invisible sword was quietly condensed in his hand, and he cut off his head against the 3 fairy bones. The space is shattering, and the sword that carries the general trend is cut without any obstruction. The guardian in front of the fairy bone tried to lift the broken real sword in his hand to stop it. But under the sword, its real broken sword was completely broken. The invisible sword cut off the real sword and fell on the shoulder of the guardian of the fairy bone. A sword that is not going to be unfavorable, but left no trace at all. Immortal Bone Guard raised his palm directly and flew out the sword Wushuang. A trespasser, one will not stay. They took a step back at the same time, each holding up the real sword in their hands, surging out the momentum of the power, and suddenly condensed into a magnificent sword array, leading the sky and pushing forward. 36,000 swords. Each sword became a mountain and sea, and Wang Yang raged. Chen Qing and others were frightened and hurried to release the Yanli confrontation. But Jian Wushuang spoke with it. Don't move, don't release Yanli. Although Chuanqiu was puzzled, he dissipated his strength and stood in place for the first time. Chen Qing was shocked. The Yanli, who was about to get out of his hand, was agitated. He couldn't understand the meaning of Jian Wushuang's words, but he immediately crushed Yanli with his teeth. Cui Jing, who is the weakest, has not yet understood what is going on, and the dynamism that almost came out of his hands was also immediately killed by Chen Qingshan. Di Qing's eyes were dignified, and he faced the unspoken sword intent. If he did not resist, he would definitely die. In this way, he had only 8 real lives left, but 1 more had to be removed. He was hesitating whether to do it or not. 36,000 sword intentions lead the world down, like the brilliance to the ultimate huamang, swallowing everyone. At this last moment, Di Qing finally gave up the resistance to release the Yanli forces. In the face of that uncovered sword, the palm of his extravagant hand had already condensed into a fist. Chapter 4795. He is betting. They are betting. You are right to bet against the sword. Including Jian Wushuang is also gambling. This celestial sword array they bet with cannot be lowered. The reason for betting is that there is absolutely no way to make a decision. These few people really want to fight. They are by no means the opponents of the 3 Dian immortals, who do not know the depth. 36,000 swords hover. At this moment, even Qing Qing had forgotten to breathe. The sharp edge of the sword, hovering in front of everyone's eyes, did not go further. Heaven and earth were dead, and the swordsmanship that hovered suddenly, like wind and sand, retreated. Jian Wushuang spit out a clouded breath, and his beating heart calmed down. Everyone breathed a breath for the rest of their lives after the robbery, and even Qing Qing could not help but re-examine him. This is Bai Shengxian's Hu, which can attract his attention, and the strength of Yinxian realm can give him a young man who feels like a thorn in the back. It is never so simple and ordinary as he shows. Di Qing was curious. How many secrets did he still have? And what purpose did he have to swim in this big domain? Jian Wushuang bet on the right. These fairy bone guards who were originally supported by the last obsession, after the threat disappeared, their offensive then disappeared. It was too late to be happy, and the next thing caused Jian Wushuang several people into deep contemplation. Although they escaped this offensive, their purpose was not to stop there, but to go to the heavenly palace. With these 3 immortal bone guards on guard, it is almost impossible to smoothly enter the temple of heaven. But he couldn't release Yanli to fight against it. For a while, even Wushuang felt thorny. Since what supports them is obsession, can dispelling obsession persist in them? Jian Wushuang thought to himself secretly, and then he moved, facing the 3 immortal bone guards, said, "Do you know your current situation? Those who break into heaven die." They repeated this sentence. He went on to say, "You, together with this heavenly court, including your emperor, have actually perished. Now you are just obsessed and have no meaning." The 3 immortal bone guards didn't speak anymore, and Jian Wushuang's words seemed to evoke their long-lasting sleep memories, and the light in his eyes began to fluctuate. Jian Wushuang saw the effect of his words. and took another dose of fierce medicine. Why, don't believe it. But the fact is that your heaven has already been destroyed. All those who participated in the war. No Yanxian can survive. All it became a dead bone. After he finished speaking, his arms moved back, and the floating soil on the ground was lifted up, exposing the infinite layers of fairy bones. In fact, you have all died out in that war. Just sleep well in the next time. Looking at the layers of fairy bones, the tragedy of the previous war reappeared. They were in pain, the obsession in the body, and the strength began to dissipate, and then fell back into the abyss. It was only tens of hours, and everything fell back into silence, and the violent ferocity disappeared. Go! Jian Wushuang waved towards the dazed crowd, and then swept towards the heavenly court. Chen Qing and others also reacted and hurried to keep up. Jian Wushuang, who was about to enter the heavenly court, suddenly stopped again, as if remembering something, turned around and urged Yanli to bury the exposed numerous fairy bones again. After doing all this, he hurried to heaven. Stepping into the broken square, the 5 figures appeared extremely small. Compared with the magnificent palace of Zhenliang Emperor, this magnificent heavenly court, although not as magnificent as it is not as unremarkable as it is. On this broken square, there are also bloodstains, which belong to Yangxian's bloodstain, which can survive the reincarnation of all ages, and today it exudes rich strength. Everything is showing the tragic war that happened here. But what makes Jian Wushuang somewhat puzzled is that this entire heavenly court does not seem to have suffered much damage. Could it be that the battle between the emperors and the emperors could not damage this heavenly court? It seems that this heaven is not like being destroyed, but more like being sealed. Jian Wushuang's thinking stopped with Chen Qing struggling to open the gate of the imperial palace. No obvious smell came out, and even any luck, the breath did not show the slightest. Then everyone crept into this heavenly court. A unique dark blue hue, reflected in Jian Wushuang's eyes. The interior of this vast expanse of heaven is magnificent and majestic, and all that is visible is the decoration painted in dark blue tones. The heavenly dome above the head depicts thousands of flying birds, showing an indescribable prestige. In this heavenly court, on the 18 mountain and sea columns lined up left and right, the totems of birds and birds are also depicted in dark blue tones. These flying birds are all of the same characteristics. They have hexagonal heads, golden eyes, dark and magnificent bodies, and are extremely luxurious. Chen Qing and others are looking at this majestic heavenly court, but only Qing Qing's eyes that have been silent for a long time have been glorious. Jian Wushuang's gaze locked in the deepest place after entering this heavenly court. There was a towering throne standing still. Sitting on the throne, a figure was sitting. A figure in Moyu Luyan Emperor's costume. There are thousands of black lotus blossoms on both sides of this invisible body. I don't know how many years have passed, and they have never withered. Everything showed a mysterious state. What makes Jian Wushuang strange is that no matter how he looks, he can't see through the face of the figure in the imperial clothes. Chen Qing and others also noticed the figure sitting deep on the throne deep in that court. It seems that it is already dead. Feeling the breath of silence in the hall, Chen Qing opened his eyes. Jian Wushuang didn't speak, he also felt the same. Sitting on the throne, the incomparable figure really had no breath, and was dead. His emperor's body is ancient. The emperor's luck has completely dissipated. This emperor, even if it fell, the general situation surging from the whole body made Yanxian tremble. Behind the death of an emperor is the fall of countless heavens, Yanxian, and even Dianxian's death. This battle of unknown era was eventually buried with the death of one emperor. Jian Wushuang has no doubt that the emperor now waved his hands to destroy countless Yanxian, suppress countless enemies, open up infinite territory, and establish heaven. But right now, everything is meaningless. The heavenly court he created eventually became a burial ground, and countless Yanxian also turned into dead bones. But at the end of the destruction, it was good to be able to die so decently. Chapter 4796. Feeling the complete dissipation of the emperor's luck, Chen Qing sighed. In this whole heavenly court, although it is vast and magnificent, there are no treasures that can be taken away. and some are just dead. Brother Sword, let's meet the Emperor's true body to see if there are any treasures or insights that will catch your eye? Chen Qing asked. Jian Wushuang nodded his head and did not object to him. He came to this heavenly court for the purpose of treasure hunting. If he did not seek the treasure, it would be called unreasonable karma. As he prepared to leave, he stood at the end of the crowd, suddenly violently, and went straight to the Emperor's body in the depths of heaven. Fuck! I knew that this guy was not well-meaning, and the Sword brothers would keep up with it. Chen Qing exclaimed. His feet suddenly rushed to catch up. Jian Wushuang did not hesitate. Almost at the same time as Qing Qing set off, he also set off. The three streamer-like figures are chasing me. But in a moment, they reach the deepest part of this heavenly court. In front of him is the base, the real body of the Emperor wearing Mo Yulian's costume. Being so close, Jian Wushuang could see the face of the dead Emperor clearly. His facial features are handsome and deep, with a somewhat restrained shadow, perhaps because his face is too handsome, covering up the deep texture of his facial features. Just like an emperor who had already died, now his eyes are closed, like a nap, so that no one can see that he no longer has any breath and luck. Di Qing turned his head back and looked at Jian Wushuang and Chen Qing coldly, and then walked without any scruples, walking among the innumerable black lotus close to the throne. Chen Qing was furious and directly released his strength, and he fought against him regardless of his preparation. Jian Wushuang pulled him at the right time, and his head shook his head calmly, as if he had no plans to fight or snatch. Chen Qing also knew that Jian Wushuang was thoughtful, and that he must have some kind of plan to stop him from fighting. After he snorted, he gave up the fight with Di Qing, but he couldn't help saying, Brother Sword, are we really going to go and investigate? That's the real body of the Emperor. If there is any Emperor's treasure, it must be swallowed by the guy to the whale. Don't worry, just wait and see. Jian Wushuang didn't worry at all, the old god was saying. Seeing this, Chen Qing had no choice but to stay in place, staring angrily at Di Qing's back. Walking in the lotus path with great strides, it seemed that Qing Qing could not restrain the excitement in his heart, and his eyes were full of anxiety. After walking for more than 1,000 steps, he finally stood in front of the mighty Emperor seat. Facing the still Emperor body, he swallowed his throat and reached directly with his hand to touch it. But only a moment later, I Ching quickly withdrew his palm. I saw his right hand stretched out, covered with scars at this moment. Blood was dripping from the scars, and the pain was very stinging. The body of the Emperor's real body, the Mo Yulian Emperor's suit, was sketched by a piece of black ink feathers, and the tail of each piece of ink feathers was too sharp, so that the anxious Di Qing did not pay attention, arrived and was injured. But he didn't care at all. The scar on his palm recovered instantly, and then he stretched out his palm and stuck it to the position of the Emperor's true body, and could not wait to feel it. Chen Qing was not angry. This thing is actually thinking of swallowing everything. And it really is not a good thing near Gongziemo. Jian Wushuang didn't listen to Chen Qing's complaints. At this moment, his eyes were gathered behind Di Qing's, the lotus path with the spreading black lotus. I wonder if it's his illusion. The still black lotus seems to be much taller than before, and it has become a lot bigger. He began to feel that there seemed to be a problem in this grave and dead heaven. Seemingly to confirm his thoughts, the next moment, the black lotus in the lotus lanes on both sides suddenly grew wildly, and then all twisted the Qing Qing in front of the throne. Where is the Qing Qing, who is in excitement to predict such a crisis? When he responds, thousands of tentacle-like lotus necks are directly wrapped around his limbs and dragged down. This horrifying scene happened only in the blink of an eye. When everyone responded, Di Qing was under siege. Chen Qing immediately grinned and said, This retribution comes so fast? However, all this is just the beginning. A sensational trend quietly spread out from the throne. Immediately afterwards, a dark cyan flowing cloud sprang from the cranial crest of the Emperor's real body, and a dark blue hue with a hexagonal head and golden-eyed flying bird was quietly condensed in the air. It was just clear, and the irresistible sound waves swept through the heavens in an instant. Jian Wushuang felt that the heart could not bear it and burst. The spring and autumn with a slightly weaker state, and Cui Jing even vomited and spit blood, and the breath faded. It was horrible at first. Such a flying bird flying from the cranial crest of the emperor's real body, carrying an immense momentum, hovered in the air, and the golden eye wheel revealed the dignified color. Then, it changed abruptly and became a stream of clouds, which directly drilled into the fairy body of Diqing. Ah! The unbearable pain resounded. The skin of Diqing was tearing, and the blood of the gods was falling. It seemed to be unbearable. It could burst at any time. The body is good, but unfortunately I dare to covet the last breath of this emperor. I can only destroy air. A cold, solemn and irresistible prestige sounded resoundingly. The fairy body of Dianxian was irresistibly destroyed. Seeing this, Chun Qing couldn't help but whispered, "Brother Sword, let's run as fast as we can now. It's too late to be late." Jian Wushuang nodded slightly, walking slowly, and then withdrew his figure. This kind of irresistible emperor's breath, even the weakest one, is not conceivable. If they are iron, they will only be smashed their heads in the end. The four bodies slowly receded, and after trying to move to a certain distance, they flew out of heaven with a rush. But then, Diqing's figure stopped exploding, and his blood-stained red eyes suddenly looked at Jian Wushuang and others. Air waited for Jin Wuyang to be the head of the thief, and wait for my last obsession to kill. Run! Jian Wushuang's heart suddenly sank. He directly released Yanli, and suddenly pushed Chun Qing 3 people into 1,000 feet. But he himself was already incapable of escape, and the essence of the blood dripping with blood was quietly coming behind him. The palm with a very hot breath was attached to Jian Wushuang's back heart, making him fall into the ice cave, and even the rebellious mind was not born. Quick escape! Diqing's voice came from the position of his belly. He even reluctantly affected the emperor in his fairy body. Chapter 4797. The blazing killer had a moment of stagnation. It was this momentary stagnation that made Jian Wushuang breathe. He tried almost all his energy and fled to escape, but it was still half a minute late. Unparalleled, beyond the terrible atmosphere of imagination, it is easy to directly destroy the sword without arms. His right arm holding the invisible sword was completely broken. In exchange for the chance of escaping at the cost of breaking one arm, cold sweat flows from Jian Wushuang's temples. That kind of irresistible, intangible breath is really terrible. Just the last emperor's obsession is so terrifying. If the emperor came in person, what would it be like? Good boy, you can escape. Diqing looked at him coldly. If at first, I might accept you as an emissary, but now, those who dare to touch the heavens will be destroyed. Hong Zhong's voice resounded loudly, and his pupil with golden eyes scanned everyone present. Chuanxiu and Cui Jing, who are a little weaker, seemed to be unable to bear the unnamed oppression at this moment, and kneeled directly on the ground. Chun Qing was obviously not well received, but he still struggled to get rid of the shackles, his arms stretched out, trying to drag Jian Wushuang out of the range. But Xingho Anan competed with Hao Yue, and the momentum he released was directly obsessed and defeated by the emperor in the body of Qing Xian. The sword with the right arm broken shattered, and there was no possibility of escape. He was already deciding to disperse all his strength and try his best to preserve the last breath. The entire heaven is trembling. Although it is the last emperor's obsession, they may still be easily beheaded and destroyed. No one can escape the sanctions of the emperor. Jian Wushuang only felt like he had fallen into the endless abyss. The ice was cold to the extreme, and every cell was breaking. Jin Sheng Dashing seems to have pronounced their death. Did it really die like this? He couldn't believe it, and the deep face reflected in Qing Qing's cold face. Everything is annihilating and the final fall apart. Just when the emperor obsessed and lowered the punishment, a sudden and outdated doubt sounded around Jian Wushuang's body. Ah, how can there be such a familiar atmosphere here? Have you 2 old things been found? It was the voice of the tall, thin old man, Yang Jun, that came from the bowl of Yang. Jian Wushuang shuddered as if grabbing the last life-saving straw, and desperately opened the bottle stopper of the bouillon bottle. Yang Jun's figure came out of the bowl of Yang, and his eyes directly locked the body of Yi Qing, a little surprised. The original Qing, who was lowering the penalty, also stopped the action and exuded the golden eye pupils, which was also unbelievable. Young Jun. 6 crows. Two suspicious voices sounded simultaneously. The tall, thin old man Yang Jun couldn't believe it. He went straight ahead and circled around Qing Qing. He murmured in his mouth, "Aren't your old kid not dead of scum? Why did you become this pair?" Appearance? I Ching took a deep breath and stared at Yang Jun for a while. And then he was a little uncertain. Is it really Yang Jun? Wandering through the sky, who can find the second place? Who is more emperor than my Yang Jun? Yang Jun stood straight, caressing. It really is you. Di Qing's eyes twitched slightly, and then he said with emotion, I didn't expect that I could meet an old friend before I was going. Having said that, I remember that you haven't. How come you are fully recovered now? Yang Jun was a little puzzled and looked at him carefully. Di Qingwen smiled bitterly, and then a dark cloud of smoke poured from the top of the skull. At the same time as the plume of dark blue clouds of smoke blew out, Di Qing's entire body was directly weak, and then fell into the hall, fainting to death. The cloud smoke slowly formed in the air, and finally condensed into a real body of the emperor in Moyiliu Yundi costume. My real shadow has long been broken in that war, and even my real body has turned into powder, and now what you see me is just one obsession that is about to dissipate. Called the Emperor of 6 Crows by Yang Jun. A touch of loneliness flashed through Qi Jin's pupils. After hearing this remark, Yang Jun couldn't control the angry voice. Damn Jin Wuyang! When the emperor is completely restored, he will keep his blood feud. At the same time, 2 streamers streamed out of the bowl and came to the Emperor Liuya. 6 Crows, long time no see. Su He, who was born with bizarre double pupils, and Dao Gong, who had face and prestige, all appeared together smiling. Emperor Lu Crow's eyes narrowed, and finally he smiled. I know you 3 old guys must be alive. The year was gone, only to see the last one at this moment. The atmosphere was a bit heavy, and the 3 emperors naturally realized that the real shadow of the Emperor of the 6 Crows had long since disappeared. And now he was only the last obsession. You are too stubborn, don't understand the reason of leaving the Green Hills. And don't fear that there is no firewood. Yang Jun sighed, and the old friend who was also the emperor became the look of the moment, and he was very lonely. But the 6 Crow Emperor smiled comfortably. I was shattering the real shadow, and at the beginning, I also put Jin Wuyang together fiercely, leaving him a wound that could not heal. If I were to choose one more time now, I still do it. This is my destination. You don't have to worry about it. Since you all left a real shadow, there will be a day to recover. It is not too late to ask Jin Wuyang to collect debts. The 3 emperors saw that the 6 Crow Emperor was so open-minded and could not help asking, Lu Crow, have you put down? Put down. Emperor Liuya took a deep breath, and then scolded with full energy. Put down. I let his mother's fart go. I want to give birth to his bone blood all the time, to give my son burial with people. The 3 emperors looked at each other, and they all couldn't cry or laugh. This is the style of this emperor who seems to be calm, and everything is superficial. It seemed that the imprisonment had been thrown away, and Lu Chao then simply said, Lao Tzu is about to die and kill the true Wuyang. I will leave it to the 3 of you guys to do it. Remember, if there is a day, don't forget to stab me a sword. It's a pity that in the end, we 4 emperors can't swallow once. Emperor Liuya was sorry. Yang Jun heard the words and seemed to feel something. His nose shook slightly, and then turned to look at Qin Qing below. Qin Qing, who was dragging Jian Wushuang back, only felt that an inexplicable crisis had arisen, and the cold hairs behind him all stood up. I smelled, this kid has the smell of wine. Yang Jun little, and then stretched his hand a long way, directly picked the wine gourd from the waist of Qin Qing. Chapter 4798. Qin Qing was frightened, almost opening subconsciously, but then Jian Wushuang covered his mouth with his hands. Don't make a sound. Qin Qing nodded, and no longer dared to make a sound. At that moment, the wine jug that was taken away by Yang Jun was actually filled with chewing wine. Right now, Yang Jun unplugged the cork and drank with the other 3 emperors. Di Qing woke up from fainting death. When he saw the four emperors drinking, he was terrified and moved to Jian Wushuang quickly. "Come on, go," Di Qing whispered, his eyes full of panic. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. Although these 6 Crow emperors and Yang Jun 3 emperors are old acquaintances, this does not mean that they are safe. After all, it was they who first thought of entering this heavenly treasure hunt, and now it is a blessing to be able to exit steadily. Immediately, Wu Dao was ready to leave heaven, while the 4 emperors were drinking. "Stop." Emperor Liu's eyes shot a cold light. "Those who covet my heavenly court want to leave like this?" Cold sweat flows from everyone's temples, and the pressure brought by the emperor is too vast to make them fall into the ice cave. 6 crows they can kill, only the little friend can't kill. Yang Head filled a mouthful of wine, and Yang Jun then pointed at Jian Wushuang. "Why?" Emperor Liuya asked. "Because that little friend is destined to wait for me and shoulder a big responsibility," Yang Jun mysteriously said. The Emperor Lu Crow did not refute, and his eyes automatically dismissed Jian Wushuang and looked at Chen Qing and Qin Qing. Immediately, the great crisis between life and death made them all look at Jian Wushuang. "Can't kill, senior." Just as the 6 Crow Emperor was about to start, Jian Wushuang's calm voice sounded, and then he slowly stood up. His arm was broken, and he had not fully recovered. His figure was crumbling, and his face was not half bloody. "We have been chased and killed by the outside world before, and we did not intend to break into this former heaven court by chance. It wasn't that we came here deliberately with the coveted heart, not to mention that several of us didn't make a move that harmed the heaven court. It would be too much to justify beheading us in this regard." In the solemn hall, only Jian Wushuang's calm voice echoed. The 6 Crow Emperor heard the words and sneered. Without the coveted heart, why did he touch the true body of this emperor? Aye. Di Qingru fell into the ice cave and looked at Jian Wushuang like a cry for help. He frowned slightly, thinking quickly about the countermeasures in his mind. A moment later, Jian Wushuang raised his head and said, "Senior, this is indeed our first priority. I was thinking of seeing the true face of the emperor, but because I couldn't help myself, I subconsciously touched the real body of the emperor. It was really guilty." At this point he turned to look at Di Qing, calmly said, "Di Qing, cut off one arm." Di Qingwen said it was startled, then nodded without any hesitation. This is Jian Wushuang found him a step to avoid death, in exchange for a living path at the expense of one arm. He didn't hesitate to wave his palm to his arm, but then he found that he couldn't cut it. Sword Wushuang saw it, and his heart sank, indicating that the 6 Crow Emperor did not intend to give them a way to live. The 6 Crow Emperor, hovering in the air, snorted coldly. "Just want to calm down this matter with just one arm?" Judging from the cold tone of Emperor Liuya, it is obvious that he still decided not to let them go. But Jian Wushuang looked calmly and said, "Yes, just an arm." Buzz! The unparalleled Emperor's majesty swept up and almost crushed them all into powder in a flash. Then, Emperor Liuya raised his arm and dragged Jian Wushuang directly from the air. The unspeakable suffocation brought him close to death. "Aren't you afraid of me?" The 6 Crow Emperor's voice without any emotion resounded. Jian Wushuang looked at him directly and said hoarsely, "Afraid? But everything can be solved without fear. Instead of being afraid, it is better to find the best solution." There was so much silence in the heavenly court, even so dead that he could breathe. I don't know how long it took. The 6 Crow Emperor like a stone statue moved, and the corner of his mouth quietly evoked a trace of an imperceptible arc. The 3 emperors Yang Jun glanced at each other, and then whispered back, "Come on, I will wait for you to take a look first." "Don't fart, you all can't help yourself. What help can you give him?" The disdain on the face of Emperor Lu Crow overflowed with words, and then looked at Jian Wushuang. "Your kid has an appetite for me, and I want to give you a great chance." Jian Wushuang heard that although his head was a little dazed, he still reacted at the first time, and shook his head simply. "The junior qualifications are mediocre. I am afraid I can't take it, or forget it." The atmosphere was frozen, everyone was shocked, and even the 3 emperors Yang Jun were shocked. An emperor, even the emperor's obsession, and the opportunity given by himself, are enough to let countless heavens fall into a melee battle, and countless dying immortals fall into madness. It is a supreme and undesirable existence. But now it was actually rejected. Everyone is puzzled. Only Jian Wushuang has his own thoughts. No chance for no reason. If you want to get it, you must pay the corresponding price. If he bears the great chance of the Six-Crow Emperor, there will be corresponding entrustment waiting for him. After hearing his rejection, the Six-Crow Emperor was also stunned, but he even said angrily, "If you don't know what to say, you must agree if you don't agree today." At the end of the speech, his phantom was suddenly dimmed, and then countless strands of dark blue huamang rushed out of his body and directly led to Jian Wushuang's body. Heavenly Court trembles and collapses at the same time. Listen, kid, my last obsession is about to die completely. The great chance I gave you is very much tolerable and perceptible. Now, I will give you the last obsession in sentiment, and understand it well. The final obsession of Six-Crow Emperor was collapsing and dissipating, and a pair of golden pupils stared at Jian Wushuang. If you finally get to that step, don't forget to poke me a sword of Zhen Wuyang Lao Air, and talk to comfort. The Six-Crow heavenly scriptures can be enlightened and usable, but they must not follow my path. Jian Wushuang has been unable to speak, as if the fiery heat that even the soul can burn in each of his cells. An irresistible amount of external force poured into his body, leaving indelible marks in his mind and in his consciousness. His broken arm is growing rapidly with terrifying force. The 5 dark cyan characters of Lu Tiantiandi when turned into dense lines, accompanied by the general trend, with the breath of Wanggu Emperor, all lit up in the sword of Wushuang's consciousness. Chapter 4799. This is the supreme perception of the Emperor, and no one knows how powerful these ciphertexts will be. But only the word Emperor is enough. The Emperor represents supremacy, and the Emperor's perception is naturally supreme. As the Six-Crow Heavenly Emperor essays continued to flow into Jian Wushuang's mind, he gradually became clear and enlightened with some reasonableness, especially the enlightenment of the realm. He knows that in this great Yin Huan, Yin Xian has a transcendental meaning. Above Yin Yen is the so-called Dian Xian realm. But if you want to enter the realm of Dian Immortal, you must feel the immortal style in the territory of Yin Xian. The so-called immortal style is equivalent to a bridge, which is built to reach the point of succession. And after entering the realm of Dian Immortality, it is divided into 3, 5, 9 turns, 3 small realms. Of course, what shocked Jian Wushuang most was that the Emperor was actually in the realm of Dian Fairy. The Emperor, who was mysterious and controlled Wan, did not exceed the realm of Dian Immortal, which was not thought by Jian Wushuang. Each of the 3 transits of Dian Immortal is a heaven. The 3-turn Dian Immortal can skillfully use the immortal style, the 5-turn Dian Immortal, carrying the light wheel of the Yen force, and thoroughly crushing the Dian Immortal under the 5-turn. Above 5 revolutions, it is 9 revolutions, which is also Jean Woody's current state, and its strength is unfathomable. After getting the feelings and obsessions of the 6 Crow Emperors, Jian Wushuang learned about the Emperor's luck, and he also knew that the Emperor's strength was the best. Although the Emperor did not transcend the realm of Dian Immortal, it was obviously different from Dian Immortal. Even if it is the essence of Jiao Zhuan Dian Immortal, in the face of the slightest obsession of the 6 Crow Emperor, there is only the situation of worship. In the final analysis, it is the existence of the Emperor's luck. The Emperor is the title, the cohesion of the common luck of countless heavens, and the infinite change is beyond the scope of Dian Fairyland. But it is Dian Fairy. From the perspective of Jian Wushuang, Dian Xian is already the pinnacle of all realms, and the Emperor is the pinnacle of existence. After sorting out the problems between the realms, Jian Wushuang realized in his heart that he no longer resisted the opportunity and obsession given to him by Emperor 6 Crow. My request is not excessive. Even if you don't want to be an enemy of Zhenwuyang in the future, then take my understanding and live well to open up a realm in this great Yin Huan. With the transmission of the last sentiment completed, the Emperor Lu Crow's obscurity of obscurity has been extremely dim, and there is a possibility of dissipation at any time. Looking at the unsmiling and expressionless emperor in front of him, Jian Wushuang bowed his head in salute. I will. The obsession of Emperor Liu finally dissipated completely. On the occasion of his death, he finally greeted the whole family of Zhen Wuyang with the last sentence he left. The demise of the emperor was not so shocking. Even the entire heavenly court did not collapse completely. Everything is silent. Perhaps he died long ago, dozens of years ago, because of his obsession. It has been supported until today. The three emperors' complete demise of their old friends seems to be extremely indifferent. But all the wine in the wine gourd is dumped into the heavenly court to talk about comfort. Endless shouyuan, countless battles, brothers and friends have long passed away. They have all experienced it. And they are sure that they will enter that kind of footsteps in the future. So naturally there is no need to be hypocritical. The whole heaven was silent, as calm as they were before. The three emperors in real shadows all smiled slightly at him, and their hind bodies became invisible, and they fell into the bowl of yang again. Slowly spit out a murky breath, Jian Wushuang seemed to collapse, falling from the air and sitting on the ground. Chen Qing quickly approached. The excitement on his face could not be concealed at all. Brother Sword, this is your future path of spiritual practice. It's worry-free. That's the emperor's gift. Jian Wushuang heard the words and shook his head with a wry smile. What the Emperor Liu just said was still in his ears. The six-crow heavenly emperor can be enlightened and available, but it must not be able to follow his path. This belongs to the emperor's perception, and his future use will inevitably affect his mind. This is why the six-crow emperors will say this. Jian Wushuang also knows the stakes, so he is not planning to enlighten him. His condensed right arm is intact, but if you look closely, under the skin of the entire arm, a dark blue bird flying like a totem is drawn by the meridian, and it will soon disappear. The news of the heavenly survival of this death completely shocked a few people, especially Di Qing, and some are still unbelievable. But soon, he recovered and looked at Jian Wushuang with a complex face. Thank you for the matter just now. No need to thank you. It's also reported your previous kindness. Jian Wushuang shook his head. Yi Qing stunned slightly, and soon understood the previous grace in his mouth, referring to him at the most critical juncture, which restrained the obsession of the six-crow emperor, and gave Jian Wushuang a chance to escape. Yi Qing spoke up and smiled, and then stopped talking. Jian Wushuang also said no more. For him, the meaning of Qing Qing, from initial resentment, to vigilance to indifference to today's talk, has changed too much unconsciously. Just a scene from the previous critical moment makes Jian Wushuang feel that this guy is not as bad and untouchable as imagined. It should be possible to try contact. After sorting out this relationship, he set his eyes on the heavenly court again. Now that the six-crow emperors in charge of this heavenly court have dissipated, the entire heavenly court has become a truly unknown thing. Just as Chen Qing and others were eager to move, the sounds of Hong Zhong and a Lu sounded outside the heavenly court. Those who break into heaven die. The familiar voice was made by the three immortal bone guards guarding the front of the heavenly court. Jian Wushuang suddenly became alert. Chen Qing frowned. No, we haven't been in the front foot for a long time. Someone has found it in the back foot? Could it be 3 or 2 crossing the road? Entered here by mistake. Soon, a large number of aftermaths of warfare from outside the heavens foretold that the situation was not as simple as they thought. Let's go and see. Jian Wushuang got up, and the vigorous force was surging. His dynamism and state have returned to the peak. As long as the Comer is not Dian immortal, he is confident to destroy it. Chen Qing and others nodded, followed by Jian Wushuang to the sky outside. Outside the heavenly court at this moment, under the chaotic and dark sky, everything suddenly became disturbed. The broken treasure true sword, the corpse after Yin Xian's death, and the violent Yin Li Gang wind were all miserably scattered in the abyss. The 3 immortal bone guards that once again condensed from under the abyss were also hit hard. Chapter 4800. Most of their fairy bones were broken, and the precious light that was flowing around was also damaged. The sky domes are faintly falling, Those who are fighting against the guardian of the immortal bones originally had nearly 100 yen xian, but now they have lost more than half. Although he was dead, Dian Immortal's final obsession was still terrifying. The martyrdom that resulted from their engagement has left this side silent for a few days, and the heavens are about to break. This is a big battle. With the continuous fall of Yen Xian, these three immortal bone guards are finally unable to support. The immortal bone guard who suffered the most attacks finally dissipated, and one of the immortal bones was smashed by Yen Li. And the Yen Xian who had suffered more than half of the damage finally stopped the casualties, and began to use huge Yen Xian force to cover the fairy bone guard. A total of 42 Yen Xian, cross-linked by mistakes, turned into 42 array eyes, unparalleled diffractive force around them, condensed into a party to cover the sky, completely calmed down. The two immortal bone guards in the formation were constantly weakened, and the radiant treasure light was disappearing, and finally turned into a puffy powder, and fell into the abyss again. The last three obsessions of the entire former court of heaven disappeared. After the obstacles dissipated, the large array disappeared, and the 42 mysterious Yen Xian successively fell on the broken square. In front of the 42 Yen Xian who had settled down, there was another maverick Yen Xian with a mature face, and a kind of dignified atmosphere of the superior. Unexpectedly, I searched for several years, and finally found a place to look at the ancient heaven. Looking at the magnificent and silent extreme edge of the front court, there was an excitement and obsession in the eyes of the old Yen Xian. A thin, slightly frivolous Yen Xian stepped forward and respectfully said, "Congratulations to the Lord for this heavenly fate, and he will surely be able to reach the position of Dian Xian." The position of Dian Xian. The old face of Yen Xian repeated in a low voice, and seemed very satisfied with the flattery. "Now when I come here, if I can get the legacy of the legacy, the position of Dian Xian is nothing. Maybe I will be in control even if the emperor is lucky. By then, who can block me from their waist? Who else can I control? Sir is right. I will wait for you to follow my swear." The small and frivolous Yen Xian bent over and smiled. Lao Cheng Yen Xian, who had come back to God, waved his hand, looked at the quiet heaven in front of him, waved his arm. "Go!" 43 Daoqiang are in a form of extinction, and the body is surging with great power, showing the tendency of the stars to arch the moon and march into the heaven. "All alert me, there must be no failures." Yen Xian, the old-fashioned face, said in a deep voice, and then faced the heavenly palace gate that was more than 1,000 meters high, slowly backed away, letting the rest of Yen Xian walk in the front. In the face of such a look at the ancient heaven, he was also nervous. After all, when he had just dealt with the guardian of the immortal bone, he brought nearly 100 Yen Xian, directly to the loss of more than half. If there is any crisis in this heavenly court, it will be extremely bad. The remaining 42 Yen Xian are all elite. He is confident that even if something big horror will happen next, he can escape before these Yen Xian die. With the joint efforts of more than a dozen Yen Xian leaders, the gate of the 10,000 heavenly palace slowly opened. No crisis occurred, as if everything had been silent for countless years. Seeing that, the surrounded old Cheng Yen Xian hurriedly pulled the team away, and the eager first rushed in. Looking into the eyes, the dark blue color of the hall is the keynote, just like the ink painting sky full of artistic conception, full of magnificent momentum. All Yen Xian were shocked, and looked at this so-called heavenly palace in disbelief. Even though it has been silent for countless years, heavenly court is heavenly court, and it is not the existence that they can touch. Although they are all Yen Xian, one side of the court is the supreme hub of countless heavens, and only the emperor can control it. Hugh said that even Dian Xian wanted to land in the heavenly court and see the emperor. It was an extravagant hope. Unless the feast of the heavenly court is held once a year, the heavenly court will miss them. Is this the heavenly court? All Yang Xian's eyes were dull, as if at the next moment, the sky edge of directly promoting Dian Xian appeared in front of them. The headed Laoqing Yen Xian performed much better than them, but it was no longer calm, and all eyes were hot. "Go," he ordered quietly, and then strode forward in this heavenly court. Compared with the sky outside, the sky inside the heaven is even dimmer. Even Yinxian, it is difficult to see more than 10 feet away. With a wave of light, a beam of diffractive force was used to illuminate. The head of Laoqing Yinxian wrinkled slightly. He always felt that something was looking at him in the dark. Shrinked. In the vast expanse of heaven, on the columns of mountains and rivers listed on both sides, weird strange birds are depicted. Invisible, it also puts a pressure on the public Yinxian. But they only had to go forward daringly, and the immeasurable heaven and earth were waiting for them. Just when Laoqing Yinxian was nervous to investigate whether there was a crisis in the dark, the wretched Yinxian beside him subconsciously gasped, "Sir, someone in front." Everyone was horrified, and immediately took a fighting stance. Laoqing Yinxian looked through the eyes. Through the dim faint light beam, I saw in the deepest part of the heavenly court, standing several figures, and in the middle of this figure, there is a huge throne. An unspeakable heavy pressure was surging. "Pretend to be a ghost." He clenched his teeth secretly, and then said, "Follow me." 42 diffractive beams of light illuminate, and immediately illuminate the surroundings, as well as the position of the throne, all at a glance. When everything is unobstructed, the air freezes. I saw 4 great men standing on both sides of the throne. Each person has a minimum of 9-foot figure, and the tallest man has more than enough space to go there. And in the middle of these 4 gods' peaks, Yu reads the book www.Akanshu. On the throne of Calm sits an emperor body in Moyuluyan costume. Although there is no sound, this scene is very impressive. All Yinxian held their breath and did not dare to breathe. They are dead or alive. At this moment, even Laoqing Yinxian was puzzled, and the restless heart was stunned. It should have been dead. They could not survive that war, and no one could survive. He began to persuade himself in his heart. Even if it doesn't die, so many years have passed, it must have been weakened to the extreme. At the next moment, above the magnificent throne, the godless body quietly opened the golden eye. Laoqing Yinxian took a deep breath and burst out a swearing. "I depend live." Chapter 4801. I thought it was just an empty shell. At this time, his eyes were opened, and he was almost stunned. His figure was soft, and he almost collapsed to the ground. All Yinxian was startled, and all took a step back, trembling. That kind of existence is no longer what they can imagine, and naturally it can't afford any struggle. As the figure in the emperor's clothes opened his golden eyes, he was surrounded by 4 figures, and opened his eyes together. The trend is surging. The air seemed to stagnate. The 4 godlike figures were unsmiling, staring forward. "Sir, let's retreat and leave." Yoshio Yinxian's legs were trembling, and he was already dizzy. In fact, these 4 figures are Chunqing, Diqing, Spring and Autumn and Chuijing. Even the true body of the emperor who is sitting on the throne, and wearing the costume of Moyuluyan, is all unparalleled. Fake. The reason for this is actually helpless. Originally, Jian Wushuang planned to directly kill some Yinxian, who had inadvertently broken in. But somebody saw the previous scene as soon as he left the hall gate. Nearly 100 Yinxian's battles are imposing, even if more than half of the losses are a huge force. In addition to Jian Wushuang's strength recovered to the peak after receiving the perception and inheritance of the 6-Crow Emperor, the strength of the remaining few people has not been fully restored. Jian Wushuang did not count him, as his strength was restored to Lu Cheng's unclear conscience. If you play against this team of more than 50 Yinxian, only a few people with swords can match. Even if it is a victory, it is also a terrible victory, not worth the shot. So he took the initiative to drive these Yinxian away. But what he didn't think of was that although the group of Yinxian gallbladders were about to be frightened, they had no idea of escape. Jian Wushuang frowned, secretly glancing at Chunqing, who was standing beside him. Chunqing Deng immediately grasped the idea, stepped forward and screamed directly, "Those who break into heaven die." The sound of Hong Zhong's thunderous explosion thundered Yinxian's psychological defense. "Adult, if you go back and go, you will all fold here if you don't go." The wretched Yinxian trembles, apparently intending to walk away regardless of the next. Lao Qingyanxian gritted his teeth without saying a word. He was unwilling. After years of hard work and chance, he found the former heaven. Now he is asked to give up. How can he be reconciled? Like Chen Qing, who was convinced by Shenfeng, seeing that they had no plans to leave, he took a step forward and prepared to warn him once. But because of his too big step, he directly pulled the wine gourd hidden in his waist, and even scattered more than 10 pieces of black mountaintop crystals on the ground. The sound of a crisp landing sounded, and the wine gourd drew an arc on the jade ground, and the bones rolled to the foot of the old Qingyanxian. The air suffocated. Lao Qingyanxian looked down at the newer gourds at his feet, and then looked at the scattered black mountaintop crystals. And suddenly he seemed to understand something. You guys posing? Chen Qing looked embarrassed and looked at Jian Wushuang. War. The simple word resounded. Jian Wushuang suddenly stepped up from the throne, and an invisible long sword had already condensed in his hand. Bring me to death. Lao Qingyanxian, who had come back to God exasperated. No one stays. In an instant 42 Yanxian, 42 Yin rushed up, and directly fought with Jian Wushuang and others. Chen Qing directly patted the real sword at the waist, carrying Wan Jun's sword with a bold move forward. Chuanxiu also directly summoned his 8 arms and rushed forward. Cui Jing, the weakest and without the slightest bottom card, was blocked by Chuanxiu. Unlimited. A whisper sounded, and Qingqing also started, and a black raven appeared behind him croaking. Such a trend directly responds to the 42 Yanxian's combined efforts. Zheng. Sheila. The blade was sharp and unmatched, and directly tore the infinite force. The dark black of Qingqing, the sword intention of Qingqing, and the angry eyes of the 8 arms of spring and autumn, all burst at this moment among the public Yanxian. One sword directly shattered an immortal source of immortals. Jian Wushuang turned around and glanced at the meaning of Qing, and then continued to fight. Even if the strength is only restored to less than 60%, but the terrible belonging to Jiuzhuan Dianxian was still revealed in the first time. The black Wubao face shattered the fairy source of 10 Yanxian directly. It was only this time that the confrontation came down, and the 43 Yanxian had dropped by nearly 20. The old Chung Yanxian headed was almost cut off by Jian Wushuang and his sword. Adult and retreat and. This time, the insignificant Yanxian's words were never finished, and he looked at the invisible blade of his chest with his eyes wide open. It was chopped off with a knife, and Wushuang didn't stay at all. His arms held the hilt, and he carried 3,000 swords straight down. The old Chung Yanxian's horrified eyes were a little full of anger, and then his arms were shocked, and the space around him suddenly changed. At this moment, it seems to reflect a diamond-shaped colorful huamang, magnificent and fierce. At the same time, there is a needle-like awning, which emerged from each diamond-shaped huamang, and all rushed towards Jian Wushuang. Because this is really too fast, Jian Wushuang can't dodge, when even if there are nearly 1,000 rays of refracting huamang pass through. The indescribable pain of cutting seemed to shatter his consciousness. But these are only blocking Jian Wushuang for a moment. The invisible sword in his hand, because of inertia, finally fell heavily on the shoulder of Lao Chung Yanxian. With a sneer, a sharp sword, almost splitting him into 2, he screamed loudly. The peepa bones on his shoulders shattered directly, and blood spewed out. Jian Wushuang also retreated at the same time, covering her heart. A ray of blood spilled from the corner of her mouth. Since he came to Daanhuan, he had cut off the past, and his ancestral luck and divine power were all returned to the divine universe by him. So he had no so-called fairy source. It is precisely that the most important fairy source without this fairy only let him escape. He has an intuition that the style of becoming an immortal is enough to crush any source of immortals. Old Chung Yanxian, who was also badly injured, stumbled back, and the dynamism surging around him was dimmed. Perhaps because of the rapid dissipation of Yanli, the face of Lao Chung Yanxian began to change rapidly. The ordinary face that is quite mature and founder disappears, replaced by a face full of heroism and richness. After seeing that face clearly, Jian Wushuang's eyes were already dignified. That face was no one else. It was the 3 emperors, Gong Ziyu, who participated in the battle for the peach in the realm of Zhenmiang. But now, his sudden arrival is obviously beyond Jian Wushuang's imagination. As the third emperor under Zhenmiang, how could he appear here at this time? Chapter 4802. After undergoing a change in the northern celestial state, the son of the fifth son of Zhenmiang was killed by Zheng Ying under the hibiscus tree. It is still less than 10 years from now. Presumably there is already chaos in the entire division, and the remaining 6 sons will inevitably be questioned by Zhen Wuyang, and will not act lightly. However, at this time, Gong Ziyu is leading Yin Xian to shuttle through the jurisdiction of the big division. Isn't it true that Zhen Wuyang is suspicious? And how did he discover this past heaven? All doubts could not be answered. Looking at the familiar face, Jian Wushuang had no intention of strangling them to death. At this moment, Chen Qing also found the face of Gong Ziyu, and Zhao Jianwushuang cast a suspicious look. Young master, you can't die. Jian Wushuang's secret sound line passed into the ears of Chen Qing and others. Chen Qing, Chuanxiu heard the words and stopped fighting in due course. Originally, I planned to clarify the truth of these 20 or so Yin Xian. After hearing Jian Wushuang's words, although I had some unsatisfactory intentions, I still took the momentum of Yanli and let them go. The situation of this great dispute has ceased directly, and the whole heaven has fallen into a strange silence. This kind of destructive situation makes the remaining Yin Xian tremble. In these few confrontations, there are only less than 20 Yin Xian left. Having stopped the injured young Sun Yu, he has no courage and plan to fight anymore. Now he just wants to escape from this nightmarish heaven. Let's go. Young Master Yu trembles, and then, with the help of a dozen Yin Xian, he quickly left Tianting and disappeared. Looking at the heaven that had fallen into silence again, Jian Wushuang spit out a sigh of breath slowly. The purpose of expelling Gong Ziyu has been achieved. Presumably, he will never step on the ground when he has not grown to a certain point in the future. The reason why he can't kill Gong Ziyu is because he is the third son under Zhenmiang Emperor. Once the accidental killing, I'm afraid that the realm is deep. Yubo, who can kill with a palm, will bring someone to kill. Jian Wushuang, who has practiced for millions of years, knows that when the strength is not strong enough, caution is the best policy. Since the 3 of them from the northern celestial state are still in a state of illusion, so naturally they don't have to worry about Gong Ziyu identifying them. So far, everything has come to an end. From the coma of the northern celestial state, he fell into the unknown heaven, and was captured by the Chui leader of the Sand Demon Cave in the Sand Demon Cave. After several battles, it led to the mysterious and unknown heavenly Buddha realm, and he accidentally fell into this. The former heaven realm has received the inheritance of the godless king. Everything seems to be a fantasy like a dream. Jian Wushuang grew up bit by bit, but he also moved forward involuntarily. He randomly picked a jade order to sit on it, and motioned to Chen Qing and others to search quickly. After all, the 6th Crow Emperor has completely fallen. It would be a pity if his collection had been kept in dust. Chen Qing and others all couldn't wait to search, but Di Qing didn't leave, but sat down next to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang didn't ask too much about it. In his opinion, they would soon leave each other. At that time, even if Qing Qing completely occupied this heavenly court, he had no opinion. But the sentence that followed Qing Qing shocked him. Can I follow you? Di Qing smiled awkwardly, looking a little embarrassed. Jian Wushuang kept silent, but he knew the ending of Master Mo. Perhaps it was guessing his inner thoughts, and Qing Qing quickly said, "You can rest assured that from now on, with me in, others cannot move your finger." In the end, Jian Wushuang looked at him and said, "Because that's the reason of the 6th Crow Heavenly Emperor." I Ching stunned and finally said, "Yes, not." Jian Wushuang had already understood his thoughts, and then said softly, "I can tell you the words of the 6th Crow Heavenly Emperor, but it will not be now, because I have not yet understood. If you want to stay by my side because of this, then I will get through as soon as possible, and then tell you the wordless word, and then please leave as soon as possible. I don't want to put an irregular crisis around me." After saying this sentence, Jian Wushuang carried his hands on his back and walked out of heaven slowly. Looking at his back, I Ching's eyes showed a strange meaning, and then seemed to be determined in his heart, and quickly followed. Are you planning to let me be your slave? Di Qing came to his side and asked. Jian Wushuang glanced at him. I never had this idea. What's the use of getting a slave? You are approaching me because of the sixth emperor, Heavenly Emperor. I will naturally give you what you want. Before that, you can choose to stay with me, but there is no relationship between us. After listening to the truth, I couldn't help saying, but don't you plan to ask for the same benefits? Too lazy to ask for it, Jian Wushuang said softly. I can give it to you, but I hope you know that neither now nor in the future will do anything that is detrimental to me. After listening to the truth, after a moment of silence, he solemnly said, I understand. Jian Wushuang no longer said much, scanning this dim heaven with his hands on his back. Nearly 3 days later, Chen Qing, Chuanqiu, Cui Jing and other talents ran out of the heavenly court, and everyone's face was filled with joy. Although the heavenly court has been broken and silent, without any avenues of luck, the emperor's collection is still unimaginable. Countless rare treasures, Yinxian methods, countless, and even a copy of the mind of the sixth Raven Emperor during his lifetime was picked out by Chen Qing, and it was full of the whole ring. Even Cui Jing, who was in a state of sadness from beginning to end, read Audiobook's www.akanshu.com was also a little excited, and changed back to the look of that unruly face. He is just a small ancestor-level master, but after such a big scene, how can he suppress the excitement? Predictably, after collecting such a rich collection of emperors, Chuanqiu and Cui Jing were promoted to Yinxian realm, which was already on the agenda. Let's go. Jian Wushuang looked back at everyone before leaving the old heavenly court. Through the mysterious vortex, 5 figures stood in the void. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and lowered his strength, closing the corner of the raised void, and closing it completely. This former heaven, which should not be exposed anymore. And the final destination is to continue to fall asleep until the years are barren. After doing all of this, everything is gone. He looked at Cui Jing, who was beside him. Cui Jing stepped back half a step subconsciously, his eyes a little bit timid, and he felt an inexplicable pressure when facing Jian Wushuang. Chapter 4803. That kind of pressure. Even his elder sister Sha Qing and those De Yinxian monks who easily destroyed the Sand Demon Cave did not have it. The unspeakable breath, such as Yuanzhu Yuezhi, can't be elusive. Jian Wushuang did not speculate on Cui Jing's mind. He was not disgusted with the last person left in this Sand Devil Cave, who was also covered with cause and effect and mass murder. But he never said he liked it. You are free. You can go where you want to go. Jian Wushuang said softly. Cui Jing was surprised, and a bit of bitterness appeared in his eyes. The Sand Devil Cave was destroyed, and he fell ill again. What place is there for him to live in this vast sky? If he had nowhere to go. But he didn't dare to defy Sword Wushuang. He just stayed where he was. Chuanqiu saw the thoughts in Cui Jing's heart, touched him without trace, and made a wink at him. Cui Jingxin understood the situation, and hurriedly looked up at Jian Wushuang. Brother Jian, I can't go anywhere. Can I just follow you? From now on you will follow. Jian Wushuang heard the words and did not agree with him, just said, after you finish the injury, make plans, and it is too early to say anything. After saying this, Jian Wushuang will no longer drive him away. Cui Jing heard the words, rejoicing in his heart, and hurriedly arched his hands. Thank you, brother Jian. Finally took a look at this resealed old court. Jian Wushuang turned around, carrying 4 figures, and soon disappeared into the vast void. This time I went to the battle of the North Celestial State. The sun died, and the celestial state of the North Celestial State was destroyed. The celestial bone armor, which was about to be obtained, also disappeared completely. In fact, this time there was a lot of turmoil in Baitian Xianzhou. From Jian Wushuang and others to Xianzhou, there is the mysterious Dingxiu and Yinxian selling Heishan Dingjing on the street. Then the mysterious 7 swordsmen appeared, completely disrupted, and wanted to put the sun to death in the heavenly hall of Xiaoxianzu. The most beautiful thing was to make Jian Wushuang unimaginable. Zheng Ying, the beautiful woman he saved during the original voyage, was also at the last moment. Fairy source. It was only within these days that an emperor died. All the killings seemed to be the same, but they also seem to have been planned. Thousands of thoughts. I am afraid that even the real Wuyang emperor can hardly find out the complexity of this situation. But the only thing up to now, Jian Wushuang can be sure that Zheng Ying will never be with those 7 swordsmen. She is like a ghost, with a very close purpose. Once she succeeds, she disappears completely without a trace. But if it's really not a gang, it's too coincidental to start working on the sun's ink on the same night. Today, only one of the 7 swordsmen died. That is, the heroic woman dressed as a man, who had hung on the walls of the Sand Devil Cave together. But it has long disappeared. I am afraid that only by finding her can I ask what happened in Baixingxianzu. The silver bell mother with the sky-shaped bone armor. The heroic woman left by the 7 swordsmen. Zheng Ying who cut off the ink head of the sun. Now these 3 have disappeared, adding a bit of mystery to the already destroyed North Heavenly State. Even if the surface of the water is calm, no one knows what kind of undercurrent is under the surface of the water. When I came, only Qin Qing and Chuanqiu were around me. When I returned, there were more Qing and Cui Jing around me. For the 2 guys who stayed beside him, Jian Wushuang didn't know how to express his position, but could only wait and see. At this time, they are deep in the void, and countless heavenly planes are dotted in the world like stars. However, these are only in Desiyu. For the entire unknown Dayanhuan, it is just a drop in the ocean and unimaginable. After simple thinking, Jian Wushuang decided to return to the 6th heaven realm. In any case, it is also the place where he is currently located, and the place closest to Desiyu to Gaoshanting, and perhaps more ancient secrets can be obtained. Jian Wushuang had already made a decision in his heart. After returning to the 6th-day realm and refinishing, he tried his best to search for the whereabouts of the Silver Bell Mother. Then go to the so-called celestial world of heaven, and see if you can resolve your own causation and mass murder. For the unknown heavenly Buddha realm, Jian Wushuang in the Ming and Ming feels that it will never be simple. The 2 great Yinxian in the same air, and the silence are too murderous. And there is still the enlightenment of the monk. Perhaps, there should be more monks like empty wheels in the heavenly Buddha realm. Jian Wushuang secretly said in his heart. 5 figures, shuttle through the void, and continue to fly towards the vast void. When he arrived, he shattered the snow on his shoulders, and the world was bold. At the end of the day, there was nothing in both hands, but it seemed like 1,000 pieces, silent and silent. The people who have already achieved the position of Yin Xian have evaded all common things, but with the barrel of Qingqing, they are destined to return home, and do not know so calm. Cui Jing's eyes lit up before him with all kinds of pleadings, and had the same smell. Eventually, Jian Wushuang was persuaded, then stopped at a plain with plenty of energy, and rested to drink. This azimuthal celestial field is vast, and has dozens of continental distributions. It can also be regarded as a super-celestial field in this large division. Moreover, Yin Xian in the past is not a rare sight. There are Yin Xian who still breaks down the red dust. Just like Qingqing, the lower realm is accompanied by wine. But Yin Xian is a minority after all, not even the top repair. Going down to Fengtianyu, it randomly found a restaurant on the mainland, and these 5 figures entered it. An altar was aged and served in turn, with more than 100,000 caddies of liquor. Cui Jing, who shares the smell of Qingqing, started to shove wine with each other. Jian Wushuang, holding a pot of exquisite binaural hip flask in one hand, sat against the window, and looked deep into the street outside the window, wondering what he was thinking about. Di Qing, who is not interested in these old brews, is secretly looking at the guy sitting opposite. Di Qing always felt that he carried a lot of secrets in his body, but he was very clear and clean, and there was an indescribable contradiction. Take care of him. The 6 crows of Heavenly Emperor have the hand. I will not be too late. Di Qing thought so, and then looked leisurely out the window. He has no idea how many years have been quiet on the hibiscus tree. He is full of curiosity about everything. If it is not bound by the sword, he may not be able to wait for it. He wants to destroy several heavens and have fun. At the time of the people's laziness, there were a lot of streets that had been repaired, and the sky was completely dark. Boom! Several extremely powerful breaths, such as the dark clouds covering the top, dispersed and fell. Chapter 4804. For a time, within tens of thousands of miles, all the top repairs were silent. Jian Wuxuang frowned slightly, then waved his hand, and Yanli enchantment protected the whole restaurant. Boom! The sound of the earth being torn. Then the pavilions overturned and shattered. In the very center of this violent martyrdom, only a restaurant stood upright, and did not even suffer any damage. Cui Jing, who was fighting for wine, shuddered at the sight of the outside scene, but saw the sword Wuxuang sitting against the window, still lazy, so he settled inexplicably and continued to drink. Brother Jian, do you need me to investigate? Chuanxia whispered, ready to fight. Jian Wuxuang heard the words and shook his head. No, the troublemaking guys are here. As his words fell, a heavy object fell to the ground. Run, why didn't you run? The thunderous roar sounded. Outside the broken street, two skinny bodies fell into the gravel. A Yen Xian like an angry king, stepped the two figures into the ground with bare feet. An uncontrollable mumble rang. Behind this Yen Xian, there are 5 Yen Xian, all with a dark face. Damn miscellaneous things, can't you run well? Withdrawing his feet, the Vajra-like Yen Xian took a grip in the air, and held the thin neck directly, lifting him from the ground. Ah! The broken hair stained with mud covered his face, but he couldn't hide his pain. The thick blood flowed down the wound on his skin. Brother, I'm scared. Another leaner figure lay on the ground, hands helplessly shoving away the gravel, seeming to want to stand up. The skinny figure strangled by the neck, slowly and calmly, a pair of bloodshot eyes was lost. Let my brother leave and I will follow you. The King Kong-like Yin Xian heard it, as if he heard the most ridiculous joke, and said with a grin, You are so miscellaneous, and dare to talk to the conditions of this forum? Go back with this seat, no one can escape. At the end of the conversation, his other big hand, like twisting an ant, carried these 2 thin bodies in his hands. You are so miscellaneous, only for medicine. The thin figure heard this sentence, and the original godless eyes suddenly froze, and then like a beast, opened his mouth directly to the ear of Yen Xian like the diamond. Boom! A slap in his face smashed into his face, and blood poured directly from Qiqiao, and he passed out in a flash. The King Kong-like Yen Xian disdainfully smiled, and then raised his hand to pick up another figure, and he had to leave. At the next moment, a very cold female voice resounded through the broken earth. Let them go. Jian Wuxuang looked at it in a sound, and suddenly a look of surprise appeared in his eyes. It was a woman in a gray shirt who made a cold voice, whose face could not be said to be soft, but she was full of vigor and self-confidence. And this heroic woman is one of the only remaining 7 swordsmen in the troubled North Tianxiansu. I saw several faces in Sand Devil's cave, but I don't know where to go. But now, it is really incredible to see each other in this side of heaven. Jian Wuxuang raised her brows slightly, already wanting to see what she was going to do next. After shouting that sentence, the heroic woman was not afraid, and her strong strength had already flowed around her. Carrying a thin figure, Vajrayana stood in place, and then slowly turned back. After he saw that she was a woman, her violent eyes were full. Who am I? It turned out to be a little girl's skin. Yen Xian, like a diamond, threw the 2 figures in his hand directly to Yen Xian behind him, and then rubbed his palms, and walked towards her without any taboo. A bit of disgust flashed in the eyes of the heroic woman, and then there was a thunder and a long sword, without any signs. Na Yangxian's eyes narrowed, and his subconscious consciousness was able to escape the terrible offensive. But a very long and narrow blood mark almost cut his neck into 2 pieces. It was just this face-to-face room that gave him a heavy blow. This made him furious and waved his hand down. The sky dome suddenly collapsed, and an invisible giant palm hit the heroic woman. Her brow furrowed, and the whole figure was like a ghost, running at an unimaginable speed to the Vajra-like Yen Xian. The King Kong-like Yen Xian was horrified, and she stepped back and said in a few steps, Crush me. With the explosion, the 5 Yen Xian behind him set off. Gathering the power of 6 Yen Xian, the unmatched Yanli cage appeared, and the terrible trend caused the ground to tear again. The originally fast-moving heroic girl was also affected, as if she were in a quagmire, and she was a bit struggling. With one enemy against 6 Yanxian, even if her strength is at the peak, it is an impossible thing, let alone this state. 6 unmatched strengths lowered, letting her speak directly against the blood. Even if she had the heart, she was unable to return to the sky. Little Nyang Pai actually dared to hurt me. I will ask you today not to survive, not to die. The burst of drink resounded from the mouth of Yan Jing, who was like a diamond, and the chain of Yan Li surged between his palms. And he caught the heroic woman again. But at the next moment, a lazy voice suddenly sounded. It's really noisy. He turned his head subconsciously to the place where the sound was made, but he saw a black urn altar, and it smashed over. Boom! A dull voice sounded, and the fragrant liquor spread out. The urn altar directly tore the combined blows of 6 Yanxian, and exploded heavily on Yangxian's face like Vajra. Then he fell to the ground with his head, and simply passed out. It was just a hit, directly made a Yanxian lose his resistance. What kind of avenue is this? Holding a delicate hip flask in one hand, and a 3-foot sword in one hand, the sword Wushuang walked slowly, unspeakable free and easy. The 5 Yanxian stepped back at the same time, looking at him with vigilance. The heroic woman covered her heart and slowly backed away, looking at Jian Wushuang's eyes, only shocked and incredible. Who is your excellency? It is best to judge the situation, and stop clashing with me from the Huozongzong. We will not blame anything that happened before. One of them, Jingxian Yanxian, though shocked Jian Wushuang's horror, was unkind. After all, in his opinion, even if Jian Wushuang is even more powerful, can it still be defeated by a dozen or 5? But soon, his thoughts were swallowed into his stomach, his eyes glaring to the maximum, because he saw that he had a 4-spirit-like figure, walked out of the restaurant not far away, and stood behind the young man in turn. Chapter 4805. Each figure is like Yuanzhu Yuezhi, full of domineering breath. In particular, that figure was dressed in extravagant clothes, and there were 8 rose feathers in the hair. The breath it exuded was already beyond his imagination. Conflict? Li Huozong. Jian Wushuang looked at him, frowning slightly. Are you also worthy? Suddenly, a flash of humiliation flashed across the faces of the 5 Yanxian. They are proud of the imperial sect gate from the fire sect, across several heavens, and accept the disciples. Although it is nothing in the big division, the top practitioners in the surrounding heaven are all proud of entering the Lihua sect. But at the moment, he was humiliated by the faceless face. That net face Yin Xinqiang endured the plan, and said in a deep voice, You juniors should not be too angry, maybe we will meet again in the future. Jian Wushuang squinted at him, and then shot directly. An unmatched force of strength swept up, and the Yanxian who was lying on the ground and stunned to death was strangled to become a powder, and no point of Xianyuan was left. All Yanxian was startled. They never thought Jian Wushuang would kill a Yanxian without any signs. Leave those 2 boys, I will let you go. Jian Wushuang looked at them softly. Jingmian Yanxian strongly suppressed the anger in his heart, knowing that he was hit by a hard stubble today. But even if he threw down the 2 thin bodies, he turned and left. The 5 Yanxian, like the 5 streamers, did not intend to leave this side of the sky at all. But the facts are not always as expected. Jian Wushuang raised his hand, and threw the real sword to Chen Qing. Chen Qingxin understood, and there was a grin on the corner of his mouth, and his figure disappeared. To cut the grass and eliminate the roots to prevent future troubles. This is his criterion for doing things. But after a while, Tianjia burst into screams. Jian Wushuang didn't care about those. He carried the hip flask, walked slowly, and finally stopped in front of the 2 thin bodies and crouched down. Look up and look at me, he said softly. The dead fish-like figure moved hard, and then seemed to have exhausted all his strength, lifting his head. Thanks, Master Xia. After uttering this sentence unclearly, he passed out. Shaking his head helplessly, Jian Wushuang stood up, and looked at the heroic woman with a complex look not far away. Come here, I have a few questions to ask you. Don't think about running away. You can't run away. With Jian Wushuang's protection, there is only one restaurant left in the mainland. At this moment, in the main hall of the huge restaurant, in front of a round table, sitting in 8 circles. Jian Wushuang sat in the middle, next to him, followed by Di Qing and others. The heroic woman had also been seated, and she glanced at him from time to time. The 2 thin and weak bodies sat opposite Jian Wushuang, with 2 eyes staring straight at the table. Eat, Jian Wushuang said softly. After getting the allowed order, the 2 figures couldn't take care of anything, and swallowed directly. These 2 boys, it seems that Mao hasn't even grown up yet? What are you doing running around? Chen Qing looked at the 2 with some surprise. Jian Wushuang was also a little curious, and the 2 boys at the moment looked really immature. And the faces of the 2 are almost the same, just like twins. Hey brother, it's delicious. The most immature face, and some silly boy holding a plate of dishes in his hand, he smirked. With a determined look, another kid with a slightly thick face nodded incessantly, and then quickly stuffed all kinds of food into his mouth. Such 2 skinny guys ate up a table full of dishes at a rate of wind and clouds. But then there was another dish presented, unlimited for them to eat. Jian Wushuang did not speak, and has been watching the 2 of them with great interest for dinner. Although these 2 boys are not even ancestors, they have some realm foundations, and should not be so dependent on food. But looking at their food, it seems like they have never had a full meal. I don't know how long after that. The 2 guys who ate madly finally stopped planning to eat again. I touched my belly subconsciously, and my eyes were firm and thin, and I stood up hurriedly, facing the sword Wushuang archery. Master Qing Fuse. Our brothers have never had a full meal. It's the first time today. It's greatly appreciated. Another silly kid looked at his brother with a grin, and then recounted this remarkably. I haven't had a full meal since birth? Chen Qing was slightly surprised. The thin body nodded and said frankly, our 2 brothers are all alone. When we have a memory, we can only rely on each other, and make it difficult to eat a full meal. Chen Qing asked again. Then you are not honestly staying in your original place. What are you running for? The thin body heard the words and scratched his head. My brother is a fool of wits and chaos. I want to take him to see his brain. Such childish remarks made a few smiles on the scene. Hey, my brother said I'm a fool, I'm a fool. The kid with a stupid gaze grinned again. As his brother said, this kid is indeed a fool who is in a state of chaos. The thin figure scratched his head again, and finally said solemnly, my name is Song Wuxin, and my brother is Song Wuyan. Here I thank several adults for their life-saving grace, which I will never forget. Where are you going to take him for a look? Jian Wushuang looked at him, and then asked. The thin figure named Song Wuxin shook his head, and then said, in the place where I lived before, there was a well-informed old monk who said that my brother's brain is innate and unwise, and there is no way to change it. But I don't believe. I want to find a fairy from, and let the fairy see my brother. The fairy in Song Wuxin's mouth is Yan Xian. Looking at his still hopeful look, Jian Wushuang only sighed in his heart. The innate spiritual wisdom is not open, and it is in a state of chaos. That is to say, such a life should not appear. But it was born because of various opportunities. It is a pure white paper. This blank piece of paper that shouldn't have been born is innately missing, and I am afraid it is difficult to make up. Even if it is supplemented with some kind of supreme secret method, it will cover the original memory. But at least for now, even the essence of Jiuzhuan Dian Xian is helpless. In the end, Jian Wushuang still said, if I say the fairy can't heal your brother? Song Wuxin stunned, and his eyes flashed a bit of loss. But soon he grinned again. I can't heal a fairy. Then I will look for another fairy, and keep searching until I find a fairy who can cure my brother. Chapter 4806. Jian Wushuang asked again. Is it going on without aim? Song Wuxin nodded. Yes, I walked straight ahead until I found it, or I couldn't move. Are you afraid of death? Chen Qing asked. Song Wuxin grinned again. People like us can earn an extra day, and life and death are things we can consider. Not to mention, sometimes death is not necessarily a good thing. Chen Qing immediately shook his head and said, no 2 fools. The 2 of them, in front of this physique with great strength like a prison, seemed very embarrassed and pinched their clothing corners unwittingly. In the end, Jian Wushuang said, This journey is not as simple as you think. If you can't even protect yourself with the easiest way, your end will never be better than today. If you didn't wait for me, you and your brother would have died long ago. Would you still live unharmed until now? If you don't even care about your life, then I advise you not to take your brother to death. Song Wuxin heard Jian Wushuang's words, and he was shocked, but then a bit of bitterness appeared in his eyes. I also want to take him to live, but my natural talent is dull, and the control of Yanli is so weak that I can't cope with the possible crisis. Jian Wushuang said softly, since the talent is insufficient, it will have to be compensated by the acquired day, or changed in other ways. You practicing sword? Song Wuxin listened and hurriedly took down the short sword like a burning stick in his waist. He scratched his head a little embarrassedly. I am not particularly proficient in kendo. This sword was picked up by me earlier to act as a defensive role. Jian Wushuang raised his hand to fetch the short sword, pulled out the scabbard. The blade was worn out. I am afraid that some spirit beasts in ordinary heavens may not be able to kill. Just throw this sword, he said without looking up, then looked at Chuanxiu. Chuanxiu, see if there is any real sword. Chuanxiu nodded and began to rummage through the ring quickly. Chen Qing, Chuanxiu, and Cui Jing were in that former heaven, almost looting all the heavenly treasures of the 6 Crow Emperors, and they were almost filled with a whole ring. Soon, Chuanxiu took out a real sword without a sheath and a black sword body directly from Neji, and handed it to Jian Wushuang. The real sword is warm, and does not appear cold. The sword body is completely black. Only the seal of the sword is carved with the word Tianji. It is a true treasure that is not weaker than Chen Qingpai's sword. Next, then Jian Wushuang directly threw the real sword named Tianji to Song Wuxin. He was shocked. Even if he was dumb and knew the weight of the real sword in his hand, he could not speak for a while. If you want to cure him, you have to make yourself strong. Jian Wushuang looked at him, his eyes gleaming with a golden awe. Song Wuxin swallowed his throat and embraced the real sword tightly with his arms. Since then, for 7 consecutive days, no one has left this heaven. The reason is that Jian Wushuang has always taught Song Wuxin the most basic sword style, and comprehend the sword meaning. Brother Chuanxiu, I thought Brother Sword was a stranger, but now it seems to be approachable. You said I would ask him any questions about the realm. Would he tell me? Above the eaves of the restaurant, Chuanxiu glanced at Cui Jing and smiled. This kind of problem will naturally tell you that you will know when you get along for a long time. In fact, Brother Jian is not a person who is too cold and takes care of the people around him. Cui nodded, looking thoughtfully at the one that just stood, with a striking figure, and the light deeper in his eyes became firmer. 7 days but flashed away. He opened his eyes slowly when the thin body gradually swelled with mist. Let's go, Jian Wushuang said concisely, and after speaking the word, he turned to prepare to leave. With a thump, Song Wuxin knelt on the ground, facing his back, knocking heavily on more than 10 loud heads. With a stupid look, Song Wuyan, who only knew how to laugh, saw his brother kneel and hurriedly knelt down, also knocking more than 10 loud heads. Adult, I have spent half of my life in Song Wuxin, and others have never granted me half of the favor, which has caused my brother all the hardships. But today, by the grace of a meal, the grace of a sword, the grace of a thought, Song Wuxin has nothing to offer. I hereby swear that for 10,000 years, no matter what the result will be, I will rush to the adults. Mingtian. Jian Wushuang did not look back, but released Yanli Qifeng to hold up his brother. Don't think too much. The reason why I do this is purely because of a whim, not asking for anything in return. As for you, let's live and talk. At the end of the sentence, Jian Wushuang's figure stopped again, and walked away slowly. Song Wuxin went forward a few subconsciously, but eventually stopped at the same place, and stopped moving forward. Then he leaned back and picked up Song Wuyan, skimming towards the corner of the sky, although staying in this heaven for 10 days, but a moment. In between, the heroic woman had to recover from the injury after a little recovery. But with the guards of the Qing dynasty, Chen Qing and others, she could not finally escape her. Let's talk. Why did you go to Baisheng Xianzu? Sword asked calmly without carrying both hands. The heroic woman's face was cold, but inexplicable anger appeared in her eyes. You'd better answer honestly, otherwise your ending will not be much better than the previous Yanxian. Chen Qing threatened coldly. The heroic woman snorted softly. Even when confronted by Jian Wushuang, Yi Qing and others were not afraid. If you want to start as soon as possible, why bother to talk more? This is not like your style a while ago. As soon as these words came out, Yu read books www. Akanshu. Calm Jian Wushuang frowned. You answered truthfully. I will let you go once. Are you 7 swordsmen, going to the northern Tiangxiansu? Is the town killing the sun? She sneered. Don't you think you're quite stupid about asking? Do you think I will answer? His mother, I must give you a lesson. Chen Qing exasperated, raising her hand to teach her. But immediately, Jian Wushuang stopped Chen Qing and looked at her. It is not of interest to me if your purpose is to kill the sun Mo. But I am interested in the kind of forces behind you. To the point, it will aim to assassinate the emperor. The heroic woman was shocked and flashed in a panic. You can go. Jian Wushuang opened her mouth, and then signaled that she could go. She was stunned, and apparently didn't expect him to let her go so easily. But the heroic woman did not hesitate too much, and she was ready to leave in a flash. Chapter 4807. Just as her body was about to leave, a voice put her back in place. Jian Wushuang suddenly realized something and said, Have you ever seen a girl with bells on her body? As soon as the words came out, there was a flash of anger in the eyes of the heroic woman. Isn't that with you? Have you seen her? Jian Wushuang asked. I've seen it. She gave me a dead hand not long ago, thinking I was dead, and disappeared after taking my things. Jian Wushuang only felt like a drum in his heart. Where did you go? This time, she didn't stay any longer, and her figure disappeared. It's a matter of the sky-shaped bone armor. Jian Wushuang can't calm down. Just as he was about to catch up, a subtle but clear voice rang in his ears. Demi Tian. The 3 words were imprinted on Jian Wushuang's mind, making him frown. Another unknown place. And is the silver bell, which bears the bone armor of the sky pattern, really there? In this vast domain, trying to find a person aimlessly is a delusion. But with a possible location, all goals are shortened. Although he was not sure whether the heroic woman's words were true, Jian Wushuang had already made a decision in his heart, and went to the so-called Dami Tiantan. After all, the sky-shaped bone armor in Yinling's hand is extremely important to him. In this endless study of the great world, so far, the sky-shaped bone armor is the closest thing to Xianyi, and it is likely to hide a big secret. So he must collect these bone armor as much as possible. After making up his mind, Jian Wushuang did not stay here, and immediately carried everyone back to the 6-day realm. The great division developed by the Emperor Zhenmiang, after many years of hard work, has swallowed several emperors in the ancient era, and their territory has become too vast, and I am afraid that there are few emperors' territory that can be used with it. Compared, even if Yinxian shuttles in the sky, it is quite a time-consuming thing. As a result, there are some magic circles between some super-celestial fields, and they can reach the designated place through the connection of Xianwenyan. However, this kind of magic circle has the disadvantage of being unstable, so it is rarely used by Yinxian, and honestly rely on its own strength to travel. After several years, the familiar 6-day realm came into Jian Wushuang's eyes. He looked back at the 4 godlike figures behind him, and then stepped into the realm of 6 days. Perhaps it was through the great changes in the Northern Celestial State, and the Northern Celestial State under the control of the Little Emperor was completely wiped out, and there was almost no vitality. Looking at the direction of Degushan, Jian Wushuang hesitated for a moment, and finally decided to return to Xiagushan first. But when he entered Xiagushan, Xia Audijin was surrounded by the thin purple robe, and it seemed that he had been waiting for a long time and greeted him directly. Swordmaster, Xia Audijin has been waiting for you for a long time, and come with me. He nodded toward Jian Wushuang, and then led forward. A line of 5 figures ran towards the most central hall of Xiagushan. When the cloud and mist disappeared, Jian Wushuang's figure came to the front of the hall, and his eyes also looked at the square in front of the main hall. There he sat cross-legged in a thin figure. Seemingly, the pale emperor, pale to the extreme, opened his eyes, and after seeing Jian Wushuang, he stood up directly to meet. But he hadn't walked 2 steps before falling back on the ground again. The thin purple robe hurriedly helped him up. "Brother Jian, I know you will come back," he said weakly. Jian Wushuang nodded. "Are you all right?" The little emperor shook his head. "It's okay, the whip is getting too much, it's all skin trauma." The thin purple robe added on the side. The emperor's anger was thoroughly investigated because of the matter of the 5 emperors, and the other emperors were lashed out for thousands of sticks for various reasons. The little emperor looked at him and whispered, "Brother Jian, the sun is dead." Jian Wushuang nodded silently. "I know, I was there at the time." He was slightly startled. "Brother Jian, who knows who killed him?" Jian Wushuang said, "I never knew that it was a mysterious person who broke the fairy source of the sun mo. Brother Jian, can you find the sky-shaped bone armor you need?" Jian Wushuang shook his head. The clue disappeared again. "Don't say this, you go all the way and rest in the advanced palace," Xiao Dijuan said, and then looked at the 2 strange figures behind Jian Wushuang. "What are these 2? "It's 2 like-minded friends I met on the road, temporarily living next to me." The little emperor asked no more, and then led Jian Wushuang to the palace. The death of Gongzi Mo has so far left most of the major divisions in a dignified atmosphere. Although the emperor has not carried out a thorough investigation, I am afraid that for a long period of time, there will not be peace between the various heavens. Sitting next to Jian Wushuang, Xiao Dijuan analyzed, "Brother Jian, if the news or clues of the sky-shaped bone armor are interrupted, it is better to sit back and spend this period of time the safest." What Xiao Dijuan said is not false. This time, all the way back to the 6th heaven realm, the atmosphere between the various heaven realms is already dignified, and there is a feeling of undercurrent surging. But Jian Wushuang couldn't wait. Once Yinling left the so-called demission, the clue of the word pattern bone armor that day was really broken. He has decided that after a period of rest, he will go to demission to find Yinling. The voice of the little emperor sounded. "Shortly after the death of Prince Mo, our emperor summoned us all to the heavenly court to thoroughly investigate all the news about Master Mo. It was also at that time that there were irresistible rumors that I killed the sun Mo, because before the northern celestial state was destroyed, a large number of Montenegro crystals appeared in the northern celestial state, www. Novel. I was lashed out for 4,000 sticks because of this." Jian Wushuang heard the words and moved his heart. He thought of the group of top repairers who sold Heishan Dingjing and Xianzhou when he first entered the northern celestial state. Chuanqiu almost died in the hands of a mysterious Yanxian. The Montenegro crystals flowing in the northern celestial state can already be sure that someone deliberately sells. And this matter can be known by Heaven Court and Jin Wuyang. And there is only one possibility, that someone intentionally spread it. The result also clearly achieved its purpose. The spears of the killing of the sun Mo were all directed at the little emperor. Jian Wushuang did not intend to conceal, but even if he would be in the North Tianxianzhu, he told the little emperor. That is to say, before you entered the northern celestial state, did anyone else set up a situation that framed this seat? It really is a good deal. The little emperor's eyes were cold, but he was really angry. Chapter 4808. Jian Wushuang nodded. It is already certain that the guys have done this for a long time. It seems that I can't succeed in killing me. And I've changed hands to kill other emperors, he sneered. It's really a good plan. The little emperor asked again. Speaking of it, did you say that the Sun Mo died in the hands of a mysterious woman? Jian Wushuang nodded, but did not say Zheng Ying's name. Being able to have such energy, and simply kill the Sun Mo, Brother Jian may wish to guess, who will these guys send? Xiao Dijuan looked at him with a meaningful meaning. In fact, after the complete destruction of the Northern Celestial State, he had doubts that he was able to mobilize 2 great Yinxian, 7 extraordinary Yinxian, and the situation that brought disaster to the East. That is the mutual killing between their emperors. Little Emperor smiled. It seems that you have guessed Brother Jian. But without evidence, no one can guess who is one of our brothers. I just hate it now. Why wasn't the sun dying? This confusing situation is far from clear in 3 or 2 sentences, let alone the conclusion of the coffin. Otherwise the heavenly court will find out who the real murderer is. Jian Wushuang does not plan to continue this topic anymore. After all, there is no nutrition. After pondering over and over again, Jian Wushuang still made up his mind, and looked at the little emperor said, Do you know who is the domain of the heavens controlled by who? Little emperor raised his eyebrows. His face was strange. Brother Jian, what do you ask about this? Jian Wushuang said, Because I heard the news, it is very likely that the sky-shaped bone armor is in the sky. He said in a meaningful way, This big Mitian, by the way, you must be familiar with it. It is the domain of the jurisdiction of the second emperor. The sun is in charge of the heavenly domain Damiantian? For a time, Jian Wushuang's brow furrowed slightly. The second emperor of the imperial prince was the one who was defeated by Jian Wushuang in the battle for the peach. In some ways it would be a headache to have a hostile opponent like a son. Judging from his style of doing things, and his determination, the meticulous character is a very difficult opponent. What's more important is that he has endless means. No matter how bright or dark, he can inadvertently injure his opponent. Originally, Jian Wushuang planned to reduce the conflict with him after the dispute between Xiantao. But now he knew that the place where Yinling might go was actually the domain of the master. This is even more tricky. I am afraid that he will appear in the domain of the sun's correction by then, and he will be directly killed. At the same time, Jian Wushuang felt weird. It was clear that Yinling was the woman of the sun's ink. Why did he escape to the heaven of the sun? Look at the heroic woman when she left. It didn't seem to be lying. The news of the sky-shaped bone armor is very likely to be true. Brother Jian, do you plan to go to Damian? No, I disagree. Xiaodijan frowned. In this kind of node, even if you can safely reach Damian, Gongzi Jiao is likely to find it in the first place. You. Once discovered by him, for the holiday between us, I am afraid. Jian Wushuang is also worried about this. Gongzi Jiao is definitely not a good fellow, even terrible. If it is discovered in the so-called demission, it is definitely an endless situation. But he has no retreat. One of the most important reasons why he came to Daanhuan was to find Xian Yi and Lao Zun to unravel the secrets that had bound him. At the same time, there are also secrets about the divine realm of the early days, and the divine universe. With the growth of his own realm, he originally thought that there is no secret divine universe, but it is still somewhat secret. Those gods who had seen him in the mournful place for so long did not know how long they existed. Why did they fight? That was like a shocking appearance. Who was the old man who stopped Jian Wushuang when he was going forward? And why did he disappear in the end? And that one of the extreme seas, Lao Zun, which does not belong to the divine universe, is silent in the divine universe. The most important point is what kind of existence of divine power, and whether the universe he once was a reincarnation. These are probably only known by finding Xian Yi and Lao Zun. Right now, the sky-shaped bone armor is the only clue that must not be broken. Even if the gigantic ruler is the Emperor Zhenliang, he must go there. I've already thought about it. I have to go to the last one anyway. Jian Wushuang looked at Xiaodi Jundao. Really, really go. Then I will go with you anyway this time. Jian Wushuang shook his head. In order to avoid exposure, this time I plan to go forward by myself. But nobody cares for you, isn't it more dangerous? Xiao Dijuan frowned. Let's talk about it later, I plan to take a break. Jian Wushuang said. But you can't go with me anyway. The problem is even more difficult if it is discovered. Little Emperor knew the benefits, and finally sighed helplessly, and got up and patted him on the shoulder. Brother Jian, you have a good rest for a while. Then I will discuss some things with you. As the figures of Xiaotajin and others left, Chen Qing, Chuanqiu and others who had been eavesdropping outside the hall flooded into the hall. Brother Sword, are you going to the Laozi again? Bring me Chen Qing. Be sure to worry free. Even if the sun corrected me, I must honestly bow my head. Chen Qing grinned excitedly. Chuanqiu immediately said, There is also my brother. I will go with you too. There is a mutual care between each other. Since you all go, then I will follow. Cui Jingfu agreed. Jian Wushuang was helpless. Be quiet first. This time is not like the one in Baisheng Xianzu. I have to deal with the sun's correction, and I am looking for something, not revenge. Chen Qing, your figure is too prominent to go. If I am not wrong, in spring and autumn, there is a condensed source between your eyebrows. It should be promoted to Yanxian soon. Just stay in Xiaogushan and break through. At this time Yi Qing, who had been silent, said suddenly, This time let me go with you. Jian Wushuang glanced at him, and it seemed that only Qing Qing was the most suitable candidate. Being Jiuzhuan Dian Immortal, even against ordinary Dian Immortal, is the existence that will easily crush it. With the essence of Qing as a guarantee, I am afraid that only Heaven's court can move him. Then Jian Wushuang nodded, confirming the candidate for this day. Chapter 4809. Under his decision, Chen Qing stayed behind for 6 days. Because Chuanqiu and Cui Jing, after stealing a lot of gems pills sealed by Emperor Liu Yao on the road, they have been promoted to different degrees. Also let him stay behind. This time he went to Demetian under the control of Gongzi Deng. Jian Wushuang only decided to move forward with the meaning of Qing. After making a decision, he went to the square outside the hall to recuperate and recover. Chen Qing and others also set their own interest rates. Since the collapse of the North Heavenly State, the trauma to them has been so heavy that they have not recovered their strength after returning to the 6-day realm. Without the inheritance of the 6 Crow Emperors, Jian Wushuang's strength will certainly not return to its peak. Now he said that it was nursing and recovery. In fact, he has already begun to investigate the 6 Crow heavenly scripture that was stored in his body and in his consciousness. Di Qing followed behind him incessantly, and the longing that could not be concealed in his eyes almost overflowed. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly, and did not care about him, and proceeded to explore the 6 crows. Tai Qing also became nervous and concentrated, even more tense than him. At this moment, Jian Wushuang, who seemed to be an old monk in his mind, suddenly came slowly. What is your relationship with Gongzi Mo? Ah! Di Qing stunned, then reacted after a while, and said after a moment of contemplation. Actually, we are a kind of interest relationship, but it is far from being a friend. After all, we all take what we need. Speaking of which, Di Qing touched his nose a little embarrassedly. He wants my protection, and I want some luck from his emperor. Yongzi Mo's emperor? Jin Wu Yang's luck, what to do? Jian Wushuang looked at him. Di Qing did not conceal anything. Every Chinese New Year, Master Z will give me a ray of Emperor Wiang's luck for me to understand, but it has little effect. To that mysterious emperor is lucky. Jian Wushuang heard the words and said, Is the emperor above the 9-turn Dian Immortal? Di Qing shook his head. Emperor also belongs to the realm of Dian Immortal, but Dian Immortal is by no means equivalent to the emperor, and it can even be said to exist in two completely with the emperor. If you want to become an emperor, you must understand and derive your own emperor's luck. Only then can you create a heavenly court and control the avenues of countless heavens. I've been trapped in Jiuzhuan Dian Immortal for a long time, and I will soon forget the beginning. There was a flash of fatigue in his eyes. If I don't say it, I'm afraid you won't believe it. I'm actually the same era. as the Emperor Zhenwu of this big sect. But he realized and derived the Emperor's luck during the 5th turn of the Dian Immortal, and I was trapped in the 9th turn, too. Speaking of which, he sighed. After listening to Jian Wushuang, he probably understood a little bit, and said slowly, "The practice is the way to the end. The cultivation is only the perception and control of the heavenly path and the luck. This mysterious and profound thing is far from being understood by talent. The only thing I can do is to feel to be appropriate. Although I said a little empty, but this is the case. Your word, your luck, maybe one day in the future, it may come to your mind." The meaning was silent. He began to relive the meaning of Jian Wushuang's words, and seemed to be thinking about something. Jian Wushuang no longer speaks much, sinking into contemplation, and beginning to conquer the 6-crow heavenly emperor in his consciousness. This 6-crow heavenly emperor text is the last sentiment inheritance of the 6-crow emperor. It is absolutely impossible to say that the sword is unparalleled. He has an intuition. Even if he realizes a point, it will be a tremendous change for now. But to realize that this kind of thing is not to invite guests to dinner, as a matter of course, it contains unknown big variables. This is Jian Wushuang's first contact with the Emperor's Avenue, and it is naturally very nervous. In divine consciousness, the 6-crow heavenly emperor presents a unique huaza, which gives life a sense of awe and pilgrimage, and reveals a breath of antiquity. Jian Wushuang was transformed into a fictitious form, walking in the sky of his consciousness. After nearly 10 million years of practice, he has gradually grown from the end of the day to the present, and his consciousness has already reached perfection when he was at the ancestor level, becoming a sea of ever-changing sky. In his vast immense consciousness, he can go to the corner where he wants to go in a flash. The 6-crow heavenly scripture occupied more than half of the space in his consciousness, resembling a flying bird sleeping in the clouds. And the closer to the realization, an unbearable blaze swept through, burning all the clothes worn by Jian Wushuang's phantom, exposing a solid chest. After his arm, which was cut off by Emperor 6-crow, was remodeled, a terrible breath flowed under the skin of the entire arm, as if dark blue blood was flowing. At the same time, Jian Wushuang also felt that in the divine universe, the blood of the ancestor and phoenix left by Feng Qi, the ancestor of the Feng ancestor Feng Qi, had become full from the original decline. Everything seems to be done by the figurative 6-crow heavenly emperor. Jian Wushuang was naked with his chest, and the long hair tied behind him broke through the belt, and flew in the air, and the sacred lines of the gods flowed in the hair. He walked slowly, facing the dim cloud that was falling asleep, with a magnificent look, and reached out with a finger. In an instant, the mountains and seas were wiped out, and the sun was dying, and the entire sky of consciousness set off an immense momentum. Then the misty cloud became a bird. The dark cyan bird has a hexagonal head. Each corner is a different color, magnificent and mysterious. It opened its eyes, and the pure golden pupil seemed to see Jian Wushuang through. The eyes are opposite, as if separated by a whole period of time, with a barren ancient silence, making him unbearable. He feels that every cell and pore in his body is under a heavy load, and he can't bear to fall apart. Go home. This is not the luck you can control today. You can have it only when the sea is full of dust, and the catastrophe is coming. The bird with a hexagonal head and billions of rose feathers, looking at Jian Wushuang, said the truth. At the moment Jian Wushuang, who is suffering, can't speak. He can't move at all and can't move. His whole body is completely captured by that kind of breath. A whiff of sensation of breath like nothing, wanted to get into his body desperately. At this moment he just couldn't run. Chapter 48:10. That is, at the same time, Jian Wushuang's real body suddenly showed an unimaginable and terrifying luck. The truth of sitting and thinking hard next to him was startled. Then Qing came back to his eyes, and his eyes were extremely hot. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's body was surging with an unknown breath. It was very breathtaking, and it was exactly the same breath as the 6-crow emperor in the former heavenly court. I Ching was suppressing his inner restlessness, but soon his heart forced him to extend his hand to Jian Wushuang. With only one breath, just one breath, he murmured, and then leaned close to Jian Wushuang's real body. At the next moment, he looked blue and purple instantly, only to realize that the true power in the meridian inside the body was ingested by some unknown power. At the same time, his meridians couldn't bear that kind of tearing and collapsed. As a 9-turn-day fairy, almost at the top of the fairy body, can't bear this power, then this power can only be the breath of the emperor. Jian Wushuang, wake up soon! Di Qing hissed, and blood was pouring from his pores. Sword Wushuang in his own consciousness is also suffering at the moment. He is completely unable to control himself, and can only let all kinds of breath flow into his body. The flying bird with a hexagonal head couldn't calm down either. A pair of golden eyes shot directly out of Huang Jinwei, instantly cutting off the weird suction on Jian Wushuang's true shadow. Then the flying bird opened his beak and spit out the prestige, and expelled him directly out of the consciousness. After the sword Wushuang's real shadow completely disappeared, the flying bird relapsed into silence, and the streamer emitted by the 6 crow heavenly characters slowly circulated. Out of the sky, Jian Wushuang violently opened his eyes, and swallowed one's strength. He only felt the pain of the tears of the mind, and then passed out. The meaning around him, the breath has already languished to the extreme. Bitter, bitter me. The coma took a full year to wake up. Originally thinking that Wuji Wushuang would wake up afterwards, and did not find any harm to himself. Instead, he was full of strength, and the realm was firmly at the peak of Yanxian. It's just that the clear breath around him is a bit weak, like the stage of slow recovery and slow recovery. Jian Wushuang didn't care. Since the 6-raven heavenly emperor was not something he could touch today, he wouldn't touch it, but set about preparing to go to demission. Are you okay? How did you make this look? He curious as he looked at the faint breath. Di Qing shook his head again and again. I'm fine. I just suffered a little injury. Jian Wushuang nodded, no longer asked, prepared for the next few days. In the spring and autumn period, 1,000 pieces were screened, and the peculiar pill, which was collected by Emperor Liu Yao, was put into the Neiji and handed to him. Brother Jian, you must bring these. All of them are selected by the 3 of us in the collection, and each one has a magic effect. Jian Wushuang nodded and took it, and the Dimitri where the young sun corrected was bound to be 100 times more dangerous than the northern heavenly state of the young sun. According to the sun's calm and cautious temper, I am afraid that the entire sky is like an iron barrel. These rare pill treasures collected by Emperor 6 Crow may play a key role at a certain node. And Brother Jian, since we cannot follow you to that big sky this time, we will not be idle. Chuanxiu, Chen Qing, and Cui Jing followed the words of Jian Wushuang. The 3 of us intend to set up an auction house outside these 6 days. Auction house. Jian Wushuang heard the words and suddenly couldn't cry or laugh. Why? How many of you still lack money? Can you spend those mountain-like black mountaintop crystals? Chuanxiu heard that and scratched his head. It's just one aspect of opening an auction house in these heavens to sell something. The more important thing is to exchange things for things. The treasures we searched in that heaven were too many, but there are nearly half of the treasures of heaven and earth. Instead of keeping them, it is better to exchange something that can benefit Brother Jian. The best of all. Jian Wushuang only understood this when he heard this. The auction house that Chuanxiu, Chen Qing, and Cui Jing wanted to set up was all prepared for themselves. Even if they shook their heads, spring and autumn, I have no opinion about setting up an auction house. But be sure not to take out too many treasures at once to avoid contaminating some unnecessary troubles. Also, you don't have to be the treasure that you can get for anything for your own sake. You only need to use it for yourself. Improving your own strength is the top priority. Chen Qing grinned. Brother Sword, you can rest assured. This time the auction house was built by me personally, without relying on any one of the heavens. Then I will call some old brothers to station. Even if the real Wuyang Emperor came, I have to honestly pay me a head fee. Chuanxiu also smiled, adding, Brother Jian, anyway, you will be the master behind our auction houses in the future. Jian Wushuang couldn't cry or laugh. It's up to you to do everything. After 10 days, Jian Wushuang ran to Demi Tian with I Ching. As he was about to leave the 6-day realm, the little emperor gave him a gold and jade bicolor ring. Then he told him, Brother Jian, you have to remember that Domitian is no better than the northern celestial state, and Gongzhigio has always had the heart of a male, and his means are also 100 times stronger than that of Gongzhimo. I also heard that he has the presence of Dian Immortal under his seat. Even if the situation is urgent, you must not fight him in Dei Tian. Jian Wushuang took the ring and nodded. Okay, I remember. The little emperor stepped forward again and said in a deep voice, If Brother Jian has any trouble in Dami, I will inevitably be buried with my son. Jian Wushuang was slightly uncomfortable, and then said, Relax, I will be fine, and I will come back when I find something. The little emperor nodded and said, When that ring is key has a great effect, and it should not be used unless it is absolutely necessary. He nodded, and then carried the meaning of Qing, turning into 2 waves of fright, and plunging into the void. Your Highness, we should go back. The thin purple robe bowed his head. The little emperor did not answer, his eyes were dignified, and he said in a long while, Ma'am, who do you think the person next to him will be? I didn't know it, but it must have been in his eyes. It must be not ordinary people. Really? Why do I think he has a very familiar feeling? It's strange. Chapter 48:11. Jian Wushuang is completely blind to this entire division. Obviously, Qingqing is no better than him. Although he was in the same era as Zhenmiang, he did not know what happened, so that he did not understand the entire big domain. This time, because there was no way to lead Qingqing, Jian Wushuang only knew the general direction of Dami Tian, but did not know where the shortcut was. Otherwise, let's try the so-called teleportation fairy array. Jian Wushuang looked at Di Qingdao. Transfer fairy array? Isn't it the formation that Zhen Wuiyang had built before the annexation war? Di Qing thought for a moment. Yes, I still believe in that kind of fairy array, used to communicate the strength of the various heavens. As long as the immortal pattern is perfect, it can carry nearly 10,000 monks. Jian Wushuang nodded. Let's try it. In order to hide his whereabouts and not be suspected by others, he has been traversing rapidly from the 6-day realm to nearly half a year. He and his 2 talents came to a remote realm that had a fairy array. Looking at the more than 10 famous practitioners who were stationed in the immortal array, who were sleeping soundly, Jian Wushuang stomped the void with his feet, and suddenly the momentum was lifted, and the more than 10 famous practitioners were all lifted up. Who? The gray-faced man awakened from the void, and a leading young man shouted, Hey boy, where can you reach this fairy array? Di Qing asked in a deep voice. Because the facial features of Di Qing are too 3-dimensional, even if you don't need to release the power, you only need to frown your brows to reveal a terrible momentum. The top practitioners who had planned to rely on more people to suppress him were also inexplicably honest. Seeing Jian Wushuang, he directly reached over and threw a small bag of Montenegro top crystal. The leading young man's eyes were suddenly glorious, and all his previous unpleasant faces disappeared. Good Lord! Our Shanghai Immortal Array was built by the Dian Immortal under the seat of the Emperor Wuyang, and has an ancient history. You can go wherever you go. There are heavens in the way, Tianyi Tian Luohai Tianyu, and Qing Qing Tianyu. Looking at the young man with the same name as the top chef. Stop, stop. You can say if you can reach Shanghuang Tianyu. Shanghuang Tianyu is a heaven close to Domitian without any association. During this trip, Jian Wushuang asked Xiaotajin and others first, so he became familiar with it. Shanghuang Tianyu, that hasn't been a place where monks have been to in a long time. There was a reminder of a short stature repair, but he was quickly glared back by the young top repairer. Then young Dingxiu quickly put the top of the black mountain into his arms, and then nodded. I can go, of course, when I am. The 2 adults are at ease, standing in the middle of the fairy array, and they will arrive as soon as they open their eyes. Jian Wushuang and I Ching looked at each other, and then walked towards that fairy array. The fairy array approached the sky in the form of eyes, condensing in the void, emitting an ancient halo. In the eyes of this fairy array, there are nearly 100 thick fairy lines flowing, which is not bad. Two adults stand firm. The young man led by the head shook his arms, and suddenly a strong force turned into a stream of light and poured into the fairy array. Combined with the strength of the top 10 repairs, this ancient immortal array rotates, and between the immortal patterns, the figures of Jian Wushuang and Di Qing disappeared directly. Who? The young man breathed heavily. Boss, I am afraid that this magic circle is going to go up and down a bit, and the Xianwen should not be able to support it, said the little Dingxiu again, and there was a worry in his eyebrows. The young man Dingxiu immediately said, Nonsense, I am sure I can't reach the wasteland. The fairy patterns of the fairy array are broken in half, and can they be sent that far? If that fairy array breaks up halfway, I am afraid they will all be hit hard. I had expected that I would throw them into the nearest sky in advance. They can't stand it. At most, they will get lost. And looking at the appearance of the two of them, I certainly don't know that Shanghuang is in a mysterious place. Without earning them, I will have trouble sleeping and sleeping. As the stream of light in front of them disappeared, the two people stood in a pretty mysterious landscape. It's so fast. It doesn't seem to even have 10 breaths. Jian Wushuang was a little surprised. This fairy array was too fast. Di Qing is also a bit surprised at such a speed. It is really good. Jian Wushuang returned to his mind and looked at this energetic, mysterious mountain forest with some wonder. According to Little Emperor, the wilderness near Dami can be regarded as a rough place, endless flying sand and stones and bad weather. Even if Yanxian is not willing to stay, it was the main battlefield where the Emperor Zemyang fought against another emperor. The power of the emperor turned the entire heaven into nothingness. In the end, Zhen Wuyang, who won the battle, reconstructed the celestial realm and named it a wasteland. However, the heaven at the moment is completely different from the Shanghuang described in Xiaodi Junkis' mouth, and there are even two kinds of existence. Is this really a wasteland? Jian Wushuang was a little puzzled, but naturally no one could answer him, because Di Qing was also in a daze. It seems that the environment here is quite good, and there should be a top repair, or Yanxian living. Find the monk and ask first. Jian Wushuang made up his mind in his heart, and then asked the way forward. The mountains and rivers of Sai live together, and the water and grass are luxuriant. As Jian Wushuang searched for the monk's trail 1,000,000 miles away, the clouds of the heavenly sky suddenly forced her to become dark. At the same time, the mountain forest that was originally like a fairyland was suddenly dimmed by the change of clouds, and the cold wind burst. What's the situation? Jian Wushuang frowned, then signaled to Qing Qing to hide his breath together. Soon after they concealed their breath, strange smiles resounded from Shino, and finally gathered in the forest. Jijia. With this weird smile resounding a few moments later, from this forest, more than a dozen strange shapes appeared from far and near. Each of these weird physiques is tall and sturdy, each of which is a few feet tall, with an ugly face, black body, eyes and thick canine valgus at the same time, quite like a skin monkey. These more than 10 ugly faces are all jumping forward. Even if they are ugly, they cannot stop the smiles on their faces. If you look carefully, the reason why these ugly figures jump forward is because in the middle of them, a flower sedan is carried. Hua Hong Yin Hong was so dripping with blood that it seemed weird in the dark forest. Jian Wushuang, who completely concealed his breath, saw this scene, frowning slightly, and then looked at Qing Qing. The purpose of Qingxin is to grasp the spirit, and even if you want to release the momentum of the power. At this moment, a seemingly struggling whimper rang through the sedan chair. Chapter 48:12. The whimper was obviously made by the woman, and the sound of kicking and shaking shook the entire sedan chair. But those ugly and giant-looking figures didn't care, and continued to leap forward happily. Help! Wu! A murky voice was heard through the sedan chair. Rushing relatives? Jian Wushuang looked at those ugly bodies, frowning slightly. I'm going to kill it directly, and I will find out later. Di Qing said. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly, And he saw at the first time that these ugly forms were not good, and the special power that overflowed was neither like the strength, but with a certain uncomfortable atmosphere. Immediately, I Ching stretched out his hand, and the irresistible force directly stirred up. The dark forests of Shino are bright under the impact of guilt-like diffusivity, and even the gloomy sky is clear. The more than 10 ugly forms that were only the ancestral level of top cultivation realm. How could they resist the dynamism of I Ching? They did not even react, they were directly burned into green smoke. The sedan fell to the ground with a thud, and fell silent. Jian Wushuang and I Ching immediately revealed their bodies from the forest, just as they were preparing to take a step forward. Those ugly bodies that were directly burned into blue smoke, like sand gathering into towers, condensed from the ground. They were puzzled, and all scratched their heads, and then stared at the bronze bell with their big eyes searching around, just in sight of the two who appeared to be in shape. For a time, all the ugly bodies screamed violently. The thick long canine teeth that had turned outwards became several times longer, and together with the body of more than a few feet, they began to linger with a dark breath. They were furious and strode forward to smash both Jian Wushuang and I Ching. But Jian Wushuang didn't look at them, or look at them. He stretched a finger forward, and the heavy strength like mountains and seas overflowed from his fingers, turning into thousands of magnificent horses, strangling them all. Strange, why didn't I just destroy them just now? I Ching was puzzled. Jian Wushuang just wanted to speak, but found that the ground was ringing again, and saw a plume of black smoke spreading from the ground, gathering sand into a tower, and transformed into more than 10 ugly forms. 12 forms, but none of them were small. You know, the blow that Jian Wushuang just made was enough to make Yanxian unable to lift his head, but it did not affect them at all. The 12 ugly physiques were even more violent, and they rushed in with terrifying fervor. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were slightly frowned, and he pointed out again with one finger, and the force of force was several times more terrifying than before, and they were twisted into pieces again, without even a little breath. What are these things which is harder to kill than Yanxian? I Ching also frowned. Although these guys were so unbearable, the resurrection one after another made him both curious. Unsurprisingly, the 12 ugly bodies once again condensed, but this time the body became a little darker. At this moment, a head came out of the curtain of the sedan chair, spit out the red thread in his mouth, and shouted angrily, "They are all nightmares. You can't kill them. Hurry and escape." Nightmare? Interesting. Jian Wushuang smiled, and had already come up with a countermeasure. This time, he no longer directly killed, but released Yanli into a side cage to trap the 12 bodies in it, constantly pulling away and consuming these guys. The so-called nightmare is a kind of extremely special energy. Their birth is even without substance, because it is conceived by people in their deep sleep, and only exists on the basis of a certain mysterious medium. This is why Jian Wushuang and I Ching failed to kill them before. However, Jian Wushuang also saw that their energy was still limited. As long as they trapped them, their nightmare would naturally dissipate. Sure enough, the nightmares trapped in Yanli's cage were even more bleak, and they kept repeating the reciprocating movement, which was no longer alive. And the girl who was showing her head out of the flower sedan was very bright when she saw so many nightmares being killed by the town. Although her hands and feet were by the red rope, she jumped forward, rushed out of the sedan chair, and fell heavily on the ground. Ouch! She had a pain, frowning slightly, and her thin lips pursed. Jian Wushuang and I Ching looked at each other, and then walked towards her. It is said that it is the most magnificent day for women to marry makeup. Right now this woman is even more so. She is wearing a bright red Shioha suit. Her eyebrows are like distant mountains, and her lips are like dots. Although she has blush on her cheeks, she still can't hide her heroism. In particular, there is a sesame mole on the corner of the mouth, which is even more lively and flexible. As soon as they saw her approaching, she nodded in excitement. "Girl, is this place called Shanghuang?" asked Shou Mushuang, and waved away the red string from her. The girl watched Jian Wushuang's eyes flashing, and quickly gave a gift. The little girl thanked the adult for help. Jian Wushuang waved his hand, and asked the question just now. Shanghuang? But here is Qingzhou. The girl said a little puzzled. Qingzhou, what is this place? Is it a state capital in Shanghuang? He and Diqing glanced at each other, and there was a kind of intuition in their hearts. They seemed to be pitted. It was urgent to ask the woman for a moment, and finally came to a real conclusion. They were really pitted. And the woman at the moment is not an ordinary woman, but the only daughter of Qingzhou's largest sect, who has visited several heavens earlier, and naturally knows the names of some heavens. The realm where Jian Wushuang and Diqing are located at the moment is actually called the Qingyu, and the wilderness that is close to the big sky is basically the two heavens. Damn things dare to tease this seat. Di Qingqing angry, terrible Yanli escaped. Well, is a big deal, we will find it again, it won't take long. Jian Wushuang relieved him. The girl's dexterous eyes rolled around, and then looked at Jian Wushuang. Master, are you going to the wasteland? Jian Wushuang nodded without concealing himself. That's great, I just knew. She hadn't finished her words yet, and the surrounding mountains and river shook suddenly. The earth was torn, the mountains collapsed, and the whole world was ruined. At the same time, the sky dome dimmed, and neither of his eyes could see the palm of his hand. The girl's complexion changed suddenly. It's Demon Venerable, Nightmare Demon Venerable is here. Chapter 48:13. It seemed that there was something asleep forever. Along with the shattered canopy of the canopy, it revealed that a gloomy sky was revealed. At the same time, there were bursts of whimpers resounding in Shino. Sir, let's go quickly. This deity respects the monk's mind, and has the most intellectual power. If he is not careful, he will become his slavery. In the haze, the girl in the red Shioha suit hurriedly urged. I know where the road is. Please ask the two adults to leave with me. Jian Wushuang stood still in his place, his eyes turned to the sky. That special and thick breath was like a big man, trapping all three of them in it, blocking all the way. After that, two rounds of giant eyes like Qinghui Haoyue appeared, clean and clear enough to reflect the traces of everything. A few moments later, those two rounds of giant eyeballs suddenly produced hundreds of millions of black silk threads, which eventually condensed into a weird phantom at the end of the silk thread. The phantom is very hazy, as if it is formed by the amalgamation of various unknown substances, and it looks very strange. It is backed by those two huge and clear eye wheels, like two round wings. Such a so-called demon venerable. The strength of the realm is actually just a realm of immortality, and Jian Wushuang is naturally not afraid. Things that pretend to be fooled by ghosts can't be put on the table. Jian Wushuang's mood was already bad, and he released Yanli directly, and he swung it out with a swish. The all-out blow belonging to the peak of Yinxian was unreserved, and smashed the strange ghost image into the air. The humble servant Ru etc. must all surrender to me. Suing confided the truth and faced the blow of the Qing, apparently disdained dodge. At the next moment, an eye-popping scene appeared, and the gas field felt that the virtual shadow that shattered the sky was actually pulled directly from the sky by the slap of Jian Wushuang, and it was slammed into the ground fiercely. Thousands of smoke and dust. The girl was shocked and covered her mouth with one hand, looking at this scene in disbelief. Almost half of Qingzhou's heavens succumbed, and the trembling nightmare deity was actually caught by the unseen mountain in front of him, except for the handsome young man who looked like a crown jade, and slapped it into the ground? That's the deity of Yinxian realm. Then Jian Wushuang didn't think so. This so-called nightmare demon king, besides encroaching on the general state of mind through some kind of bewitching means, his real body was not even as good as the ordinary Yinxian. Even more unfortunately, Jian Wushuang's consciousness has already reached full consummation when he achieved ancestry in the divine universe, far from being comparable to this nightmare demon. Even if he stood still, letting the deity to nibble at the state of mind, he could only return without success. Naturally, Jian Wushuang is also too lazy to use a means to directly cover it with one palm. The deep black gas on the sky dome quickly dissipated, and two giant eye wheels like Haoyue were also blinded by Di Qing. Humble slave, how dare you, how? Without saying a word, Jian Wushuang once again slapped the nightmare demon into the ground. Noisy. Jian Wushuang frowned. It was nothing but a nightmare that engulfed in greed. It was not worthy of him. Now that he knew that this place was not Shanghuang Tianyu, he and I Ching apparently did not intend to stay, turned around and prepared to leave. Adult, please stay. A cry rang out. It was the retention of the girl in Xiuha suit. Seeing him looking back, her cheeks were even more ruddy, and she stretched her hands to pull up her sideburn like broken hair. She looked like a very stiff figure and gave a salute. The little girl washes the pool and thanked the adults for their life-saving grace. Jian Wushuang didn't plan to wait for her to finish, just waved his hand, and he planned to leave. Hello, can you listen to Ben Ant? The little girl finished speaking. The girl named Qingqi's voice was gentle. I'm aware of the upper wilderness that you mentioned. Jian Wushuang Wenyan paused and looked at her again, not sure. Do you really know? Qingqi raised his eyebrows proudly. That is, of course. My father is the first suzerain of Qingzhou. The resources in his hands are not countable. At that time, I followed my father to travel to various heavens. He pondered for a moment, and then said, since that is the case, could the girl tell Shanghuang the approximate location? Is it important for you to go to Shanghai? That's right. Well, it's because you saved my aunt. The little girl's life. I decided to take you personally. I don't need it anymore. The journey is dangerous. No. I must be asked to take you there. But it is extremely desolate and secret. Even if I tell you the approximate location, you can't find it. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other, and some were unsure. At this moment, the nightmare demon Venerable, who was almost distracted by the two slaps, quietly crawled out of the ground and was ready to escape. Qingqi looked at the truth and hurriedly said, Adult must not let him escape, he is a big harm. Jian Wushuang nodded his head and took a quick move. He immediately ingested the Demon King and exquisitely squeezed it into the size of a projectile. Qingqi was once again shocked by this method. The demon who could resist the chamber with her father was now rubbing up. Let go of the deity, the humble servant, you will regret it. The demon squeezed into projectile size jumped like thunder. He seemed to be screaming without fear. When Jian Wushuang was about to twist it out, Qingqi suddenly stretched out two palms and caught his palm. His eyebrows bent into a crescent moon. Master, can you give me this thing? I plan to give it to me. Swallow taper swallowed. Jian Wushuang drew back his palm indifferently. By the way, the Demon King was thrown to her. Thank you, Master, Qingqi said. And then he directly undid the red band that tied his hair, and the projectile-sized Demon King. Are you going to take us to the wasteland? Di Qing interjected and asked. Qingqi nodded again and again. Of course, without my leadership, you will definitely not be able to go to Shanghuang. Then let's leave now, Jian Wushuang said. No hurry. Please go back to the sect gate with me first. I plan to bring some things. Let's go again. Qingqi rode, and then stride in the forest in a big step, reversing the previous little daughter's posture. Go ahead. Hurry up to keep up. It's really troublesome. Sooner or later, I'll catch that thing, and it'll slap my bones. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly, and then followed him with the Qing, who was wearing a red Xiuha suit, and washed the pool. Thousands of Xuanqi mountains and rivers were left behind, and the number of monks gathered around the mainland began to increase. Chapter 48:14. It was only half a day before I went to find the elder Zongmen, and a group of disciples, who came to Qingqi before they appeared. Li Bo, you can be regarded as coming. Qingqi was sullen. Would you like to come to the Mozen's old den for a while later? Elder Zongmen, who is called Li Bo, has a calm complexion and holds a jade rod. After hearing her complaint, he smiles bitterly. My little ancestor, we are all desperate to find you. No, you will surely be able to find you in half a day. Qingqi snorted, and then picked up the red belt tied with the deity, and shook it. This guy has been caught by the girl. The teacher returns to the sect. Li Bo was stunned. Before he could fix his mind, The figure of Shi Qingqi was already as far away as the same. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing also followed suit. Above a cloudless and voluminous Tsongshan mountain, there are more than 100 chains, traverse the various mountain ranges, and the sect gates on each peak are connected in series, which looks magnificent. This is the most prestigious sect gate in Qingzhou, named Shangqing Pavilion. Almost half of the monks in the heavens are honored to enter the Shangqing Pavilion. This is because the patriarch of the Shangqing Pavilion is an immortal Yanxian, and his disciples have more than a dozen powerful Yanyans. No matter which continent they look at, they are all dominated by Biju. The guarding mountain array that covered the entire Shangqing Pavilion also demonstrated its detachment. Although the Shoshan formation is just a matter of Jian Wushuang's wave, but he still condenses his breath and prepares to enter the mountain gate of Shangqing Pavilion. But then, more than 10 disciples of Shoshan flew directly from the dark and stopped them. Shangqing Pavilion is heavy, outsiders stop. A bunch of stupid things. Didn't you see that this is the noble guest invited by the girl? Shi Qingqi turned back angrily. It's okay to wash the girl, we won't go in. We are waiting here for a day. If washing the girl is really inconvenient, I will retreat. Jian Wushuang whispered, but stepped back and waited. Well, after I pick up something, I will walk with you, Shi Qingqi hurriedly said, and the back shape flashed directly into the mountain gate. Looking at the figure that was quite off, Jian Wushuang always had a kind of unreliable hunch on his mind. Why don't you let me go? I'm going to go today. Inside the pavilion of the Shangqing Pavilion, Zikinki stood on a side of the mountain, akimbo, and his red makeup had been replaced with a plain shirt. Dare you dare to let me put on the wedding dress to elicit the nightmare demon venerable? Why don't you dare to let me go out of our heaven to visit now? Nonsense, Qingqi, please hurry me down. The middle-aged man in a white robe, restrained and glorious, yelled angrily. Zikinki still has his hands on his hips. I don't, Zikinghua, you say yes or no. Don't agree. The middle-aged man was irritated. Do you know how much you weigh, a dead girl? Do you know the concept of Tianyu? A girl like you can't even get out of Tianyu, and will be torn by the wind. Do you know? Come on, don't I hear that kind of falsehood? You don't want to lie to me. In short, I'm done this time, no one can stop me. Shi Qingqi said loudly. The middle-aged man apparently did not plan to endure this arrogant and willful girl. He stretched out his hand and waved 1,000 strands of huameng firmly to the washing pool, and dragged her off the rock. Wait, girl, you don't want to come up with 100 years of confinement. Don't, Dad, I don't want to be confined. Shi Qingqi screamed, struggling, but she was just a master of yin yan. How could she break free of Yin Xian's shackles? At this moment, a stream of streamers flew down the mountain and stone, cutting off the huameng in the middle-aged man's hand, and then directly carrying the wash pool and running. Because of the speed approaching the extreme, when he reacted, the streamer had already leaped more than 100 miles away. It was a snow-white variegated fox-like creature that resembled a kind of black tiger. Its speed was so fast that it escaped from the mountain gate of Shangqing Pavilion in a blink of an eye. All the elder disciples of Shangqing Pavilion listened to me and gave me a life of Zikinki. If anyone took it down, I would give her a license. All the gates of the Shangqing Pavilion were sensation for a time, and a total of more than 60,000 disciples were dispatched to capture the Qingqi. Jian Wushuang, who had been waiting outside the mountain gate, raised his eyebrows slightly after hearing the warning sound from the sky. A moment later, a fragrant wind swept out of the mountain gate, riding across the cleansing pool on the back of the beast with a look of excitement. Master, my father, he agreed, let's run quickly. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other, then shook their heads helplessly. This was a huge chase code in the undisputed Xuanao mountain gate. The three bodies broke through the clouds and soared, followed by tens of thousands of disciples behind the black pressure. Quite a sense of panic. But with the help of Jian Wushuang and I Ching, those tens of thousands of disciples could only watch the three figures in the end. Just like the stars disappeared in the sky, the middle-aged man hurried over after a while, but when he saw the empty clouds, there was still half of his daughter. He was desperate and roared, "Who is it who abducted my daughter?" Far away, It seems that the voice of Zakinki was sent from Jixiati. Dad, you can rest assured. I will be safe and sound. Maybe I can still find the mother during the journey. You bully the ancestor. The clouds of smoke dissipated, and the original blue sky vault disappeared, replaced by an endless void. The uncountable big day stars dotted one of them. One side of the heavenly plane also flooded into her eyes. It's so beautiful. No wonder my mother will leave my father to travel to the void. Shi Qingqi murmured. Jian Wushuang didn't want to ask about her family's private affairs, and knew that the girl had stolen away from his father, so she planned to return it once she knew the specific location of Shanghuang. Immediately afterwards he asked, I said to wash the girl. Where is the location of Sheng Huangxinyu, do you know? Shi Qingqi was refreshed, his eyes blinked flexibly, and then he was affirmed. No, I must know it's there. At the end of the speech, she stretched out her slender palms and pointed to a desolate emptiness that was rare even in the stars. Jian Wushuang and Yi Qing are now also regarded as dead horses as living horse doctors, no matter whether her words are true or false. And after confirming it again, they went forward. The three bodies are like streamers flying towards the unknown sky. That kind of deserted, silent atmosphere of restraint envelopes the entire plane of heaven, like a thick layer of water waves. Entering into it, suddenly an unparalleled pressure blessing. Shi Qingqi snorted, and his whole body suddenly collapsed. This heavy pressure is that even Jian Wushuang feels strenuous, let alone her. Looking around, the entire heavenly plane is composed of rugged dark red rocks, boundless and borderless. There is no other than the rock. That kind of prohibitive breath is more obvious, but I don't know where it came from. Are you sure this is a wasteland? Di Qing asked Jian Wushuang while looking at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang looked around, and finally looked at the Shiqing pond. With his refuge, Shi Qingqi quickly recovered from the confusion, but when the two looked at him, they suddenly felt a cold sweat. It seems probably not. Is it right or not? Di Qingxing screamed. Vicious. Shi Qingqi didn't dare to finish it, but just shook his head. No, certainly not. Jian Wushuang heard and said, Since it is not, let's leave, the journey can't be delayed. Di Qing nodded, and when he was about to leave, Shi Qingqi suddenly screamed. The little beast that had been entrenched in her neck seemed to be pulled by some unknown force, and fell straight down. Sanqing! She exclaimed, then rushed to the ground desperately. Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly frowned, and his figure flashed down. Perhaps because of that kind of prohibition, the gravity of this whole sky is up to 1,000,000 times. And the speed of falling is even more terrible. Afterwards, a bunch of Chinese mangosteens pulled down the falling beast and washed the pool, and finally let her fall to the ground. Shi Qingqi hugged the little beast and sat on the ground looking gratefully at Jian Wushuang. Don't be so reckless next time, leave at a speed, he said indifferently, and then turned to leave. At this time, that wild, silent atmosphere seemed to wake up from a long time ago, and emerged thinly. Emperor, are you here? There was a thunderous sound with excitement in all the sky. The voice has order, avenue and blessings of luck. It is extremely complicated and rare. Shi Qingpo was shocked to stand up in an instant, and jumped towards the back of Jian Wushuang, as if he were walking away. Emperor, are you here? Are you here to lead us? The voice was thick, and there was some uncertainty in the excitement, and he was asking carefully. Di Qing was also shocked, facing the breath of that voice. He felt like he was facing a big enemy. Jian Wushuang said nothing in silence, and at the same time backed away without any trace, ready to escape at any time. So far, he understands that it is very likely that an unintentional intrusion into this heavenly domain has sealed the existence of a certain ancient power. Chapter 48:16. Moreover, the existence of this ancient power is very likely that Zhen Wuyang was sealed off from Zhen Wuyang when he opened up his domain. Shi Qingqi squatted behind Jian Wushuang and stared at the beautiful eyes in horror. Emperor? Emperor, why don't you speak? The voice that could deter the truth, but very cautious, showed a sense of surrender. Jian Wushuang, who was also a little nervous at first, calmed down, because he heard the respect in his voice, the mellow feeling, which was by no means a treacherous villain. Wushuang, leave this place quickly, Di Qing said cautiously. Jian Wushuang looked at him, and then said, no hurry, let's wait here for a moment. When he was finished, he walked slowly. Wait for me. Ziqingqi quickly followed, fearing that it would be half a point behind. Tai Qing frowned, and eventually followed without saying a word. The reason why Jian Wushuang didn't leave, but moved forward slowly, was because the sound of the call gave him an inexplicable and intimate feeling. The more you move forward, the more clear the voice becomes. Secretary, see the Emperor. An ancient scream seemed to come from the heart of the earth, respectful and pious. Jian Wushuang's heart moved, and then he looked at the rugged mountain stones under his feet. Those voices obviously came from the heart of the earth. After a moment of silence, he said, I am just a passerby, not your emperor. Those voices disappeared, and then resounded again. It's impossible. Your whole body has the breath of an emperor. How could it not be a prince of a prince? Are you Emperor Renunciation? The voice suddenly felt sad and lonely. I'm really not your emperor. I'm just a passerby who didn't intend to break in here. Jian Wushuang was helpless, and he asked, what is your emperor? What is the name? The voices suddenly became alert again. Are you Zhenwiang's seated eagle dog? Jian Wushuang responded, no, rest assured. The voice was silent for a moment, and finally said, the real name of the emperor is the Six-Crow Emperor. My heart moved like a thunder that exploded. Isn't the name of the Emperor Six Crows the master of the former heavenly court, who had previously entered into Wushuang, and other people, without any intention? The real name of the emperor could not be repeated. In combination with the excitement of these previous voices and piety, they were definitely the subjects of the Emperor of the Six Crows. It's just that it's too coincidental. A heavenly field that I didn't intend to enter. The power that was sealed in it was actually related to the Six Crow Emperors. Since you say you are a guest, why is there the breath of Emperor Lu Crow? Jian Wushuang heard and said, a sentence or two of this matter are unclear. Please show up. The world was silent for a long time, and the voice sighed. It's not that we don't want to show up, we are really weak. Our fairy source is imprisoned by the eagle dog under the true Wuyang seat. The fairy body is bound, and we can't move it for half. The sword moved uncontrollably, and through those sounding directions, he had determined that the place where they were imprisoned was in the divine peak directly in front. He flew away directly, facing the Shenfeng, palms and fingers like a sword, with thousands of sword intentions, carrying the momentum to cut off the Shenfeng. Boom! The whole Shenfeng is divided into two, and at the same time Jian Wushuang releases the sword intention one after another, like carving, constantly cutting Shenfeng. In the end, the whole Shenfeng was cut, leaving only a base of thousands of feet. Then, with a wave of his hand, the stone chips kept peeling off, eventually revealing a chain of thick and long dragons. There are thousands of chains, and at the end of the chains there are 18 bodies trapped. The clothing on them was already broken, and the trapped limbs were twisted in a rather strange posture, apparently broken. This is a total of 18 figures, which were printed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Shi Qingqi covered his mouth with his hands, afraid to make a sound. Di Qing also frowned, and was always vigilant. 18 body shapes, 18 great Yinxian. It's just that they are so miserable. It still makes Jian Wushuang unexpected. Faced with such a huge movement, these 18 bodies are naturally aware, but they are all at a loss, and no one looks at Jian Wushuang, as if there is no such thing as Sword Wushuang. Jian Wushuang looked at them, and quickly found out the reason. These 18 great Yinxian, all their eyes have been dug out. Only empty eyes, naturally cannot see the outside world. Are you still there? The old man with the long eyebrow headed asked carefully. Jian Wushuang nodded. I'm here. In this case, can you tell me why you have the breath of Emperor Six Crows? Naturally, I can tell. Jian Wushuang had no intention of concealing it. But even if he had no intention of entering the heavenly court of the Six Crow Emperor, and how to gain the perception of the Six-Crow Emperor. He spoke to them carefully. Ding Qing was cautious, and directly released the Yanli, wrapping up the wash pool with his ears ready to listen to ensure that Jian Wushuang's words would not be heard by anyone other than them. After all, such matters are matters of life and death, and if they come out, the consequences will be catastrophic. Time goes by. When Jian Wushuang's voice finally stopped, everything was silent. The 18 Dayan immortals were silent, as if their hearts were dead. Since their eyes were dug out, they naturally couldn't cry in sorrow, but just sluggishly. In the end, the old man with long eyebrows asked in a loud voice, "Are you all dead?" "Yes, there is no Yinxian to Yinxian survive. If the sword is unparalleled, it is like a sharp knife cutting them fiercely." Slowly lowering his head, the old man with long eyebrows mourned, "The servants are incompetent, and ultimately failed to keep the heaven and protect the emperor. The practice has been tempered all the way to the present, making Jian Wushuang like a rock, but a complete state of mind does not mean cold blood." He had seen countless immortal bones in that realm, and each immortal bone was once the immortal that dominated the heaven, but belonged to the war between emperors and kings, and they all died. The reason I have seen it, so there will be resonance and naturally they can feel their death. Jian Wushuang said these things, and his mood seemed to be somewhat transparent. In the end, the old man with long eyebrows slowly raised his head, looked in the direction of Jian Wushuang, and said slowly, "Since the emperor finally gave you the inheritance and sentiment to you, then live well."